Can you hear me? Yes. Hello, everybody. You're back. How was lunch? Good? Good? Okay, cool. All right, our next speaker, Sarah from Greylock. A couple interesting things about her. I think she was product lead at Pinterest, which is pretty impressive. But what's really even funnier, and you'll laugh right now when she comes out, she was captain of our rugby team back in the days. Sarah, come on down. Captain of the rugby team.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, great. Oh, and so that thing is not going to be on, huh? All right. We're going to wing this, you guys. All right, so it's good to see you all. So I'm going to be talking about engagement today. And can you understand me well? It sounds really loud for me, but you guys are good? Okay, thanks. So what I am going to be talking about today is something that I think is probably on the minds of all of you, which is if you're building a consumer company, and specifically like this presentation is about non-transactional consumer companies, although I think it's going to be relevant to most of you, but just know that this is really suited for non-transactional consumer companies. But if you're okay, how do you maximize your chances of becoming one of the enduring multi-billion-dollar companies? And this is something that we obsess over at Greylock. We have been investors in, many of the large consumer companies that have become these iconic companies, and we invest at the very, very early stages. I think I might need the mic, but all right. Oh yes, can you turn that on? Thank you. We invest in the very early stages of these companies, so Airbnb, Facebook, LinkedIn, the Series A, Series B for all of these companies. All right, we are in business now. I can actually see my slides. And the thing about me is that I'm also kind of similar story. I actually started my career in investing, was at Bessemer Venture Partners, and was lucky enough to invest in the Series A of Pinterest when it was a 5-person company and 30,000 users. And so it was at the very, very beginning of something that ended up being this, large, iconic business. When I left Pinterest, I actually ended up joining the company a year later, and then when I left, we had just crossed the threshold of 100 million monthly active users. So what do you look for when you're, a founder starting a company, when you are an investor looking at companies at the very, very early stages? Like, what are the things that you look for? And to me, it all comes down to engagement. And this is probably a little different than what you guys are used to hearing about. I know that people talk a lot about growth, but I actually think that the engagement is the fuel powering all these iconic consumer businesses. And specifically, the framework that I think about when it comes to thinking about engagement is what I call the hierarchy of engagement. And some of you may have read, I wrote this in a Medium post recently, but so the first level of engagement is what I call the growing engaged users. And I'll talk about each of these levels. The second level is retaining users. So once you've got this growing base of engaged users, how do you make sure that you keep them? And then the third is that ideally your product turns the engagement that your users are giving you into something that basically propels the company forward with these virtuous loops, which I call makes the company self-perpetuating. And if you can achieve these three levels, I believe you have the best chance possible of building one of these iconic and enduring businesses. So let's talk about the first one. So as I mentioned, in Silicon Valley, you guys probably hear this all the time. It's about growth hacking. It's about growth. And you can see this is the number of people doing a search on Google for growth hacking right now. It just keeps on going up. And, growth, don't get me wrong, it is really hard to get growth, but not all growth is created equal. A lot of companies actually get growth pretty early on in their life cycles. And what you see is that not all growth is created equal. That there's good growth and there's bad growth. And what good growth is it doesn't matter how many downloads you get or how many monthly active users it gets. What I think you really need to focus on is growing users completing the core action. And what I mean by core action is it's the action that you want your users to do that is the foundation of your product, that without people completing that action, you wouldn't have a product. So, obviously I come from Pinterest. Like, what would Pinterest be without pinning? Or what would Twitter be without tweeting? Even YouTube, like, when I was thinking about what's the core action for YouTube, I thought, oh, of course, it's watching a video. But that's not actually, like, what YouTube innovated on, like what their kind of disruption was of the very early days, was figuring out how to make it super easy to get people to upload content into YouTube so that there is stuff to watch. And so YouTube just wouldn't exist if people weren't constantly uploading new content into YouTube. So that's the core action that they have to care so much about. And so I think when you don't focus on people completing the core action, and you just focus on like this kind of top line number that people like to talk about in the press or show many a VC a slide for, it's like the empty calories of growth. It's really like not what's good for you, and it's not what you should be tracking your business on. And so then the key question is, all right, you understand what your core action is. How do you make sure that you are going to be able to grow that base of people again and again and again to build a really big business? And one way of thinking about that is actually something that Nir Eyal talks about, which is actually a BJ Fogg behavioral model, which is that you look at how much motivation a user needs to complete the action and how easy it is for them to do that. It's called ability. And there's like this threshold, this kind of curve that you have to have like someone jump over. And so it either has to be really easy, or you have to be really motivated, or some like combination of the two. And if you have an action that is over that line where the trigger succeeds, and you have like a really good chance of building that base out. And that's what leads you to the second level, which is retaining users. So let's assume you've got a company where you have this you have a strong foundation for the hierarchy. You have a growing base of engaged users. Now the question is whether you'll get those users to stick. Because if you don't get those users to stick, what happens is you have like the leaky bucket problem, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with, which is this idea that you kind of keep on bringing people in, but you lose them. And so you have to be increasing the number of people you bring in just to grow, because otherwise you end up losing everybody. So having a sticky product where you retain people is incredibly important. And the way that I think, like when I look around at the best products and what they've done to create sticky products, I think that they do two things just really, really well, which is number one, they create accruing benefits as a user engages with the product, it gets better for them, and I'll talk about this. And they also create this idea of a mounting loss, which is what happens if a user leaves a product. So what I mean by accruing benefits is that really a user, like you should be able to ask your users, like, do you feel that the more I use the product, the better it gets? And it should get the better because as I'm engaging with the product, I'm either giving you explicit data on what I want or implicit data, and then you're using that data to kind of make this product better for me. So one company obviously to think about like is Facebook. Like they are incredible at making a product that that gets better and better for us. When I connect to a friend on Facebook, assuming it's a real friend and not someone that I'm just going through a list and randomly connecting to, but when it's really a real friend and I connect to that person, that's an explicit action where I understand what that means for me as a user, and it means that my newsfeed experience is going to get more engaging because all of a sudden I'm going to start to see content from my friend. But Facebook also uses my implicit actions. So it's not just friending someone, it's what I read, what I kind of go through and don't even pay attention to, what I like. You know, the things that are not explicitly about putting content into my newsfeed, but Facebook uses all that data I'm giving them to constantly make my experience in the newsfeed better, which makes me keep on coming back because there's always engaging content for me there. The flip side is what I call mounting loss. And so the idea about mounting loss is that the longer you use a product, the harder it should be to leave the product. So, you know, again, to use Facebook, I mean, I'm sure we're all in the same boat. Like, I don't know how many times I've deleted Facebook from my phone and then reinstalled it because I have my friends there. I have my photos there. I have, you know, it's where people know to reach out to me. And so I have so much to lose from leaving Facebook right now that the combination of the two things means that I'm never going to leave Facebook. We're all probably never going to leave Facebook. You know, Evernote is another example of a company. I don't know how many of you guys, are there any Evernote users out here? Yeah, I am like addicted to this product. Like, I put so much content into Evernote now. Like, every time I meet with a founder, I'm taking notes in Evernote. I am forwarding emails to Evernote. I'm dropping files into Evernote. And it's because the more I use it as like an extension of my brain, the better it gets. Like, I do a search and I just know that everything I have is going to be in Evernote. And so it has the accruing benefit, and at the same time, because I'm using it and I'm becoming more dependent on it, and it's such like this extension of really my brain, I can never leave. Like, I am going to be a lifelong customer for Evernote, and whenever there was news about Evernote, like having some problems, like I was afraid, because if I didn't have Evernote, I probably would not remember where I live or what my social security number is or anything else. So let's take an example of like when a company doesn't actually go up and like kick ass on level 2. And I think about anonymity apps. So I don't know if you guys are big users of Secret. Oh, Secret's now gone, but Yik Yak or Whisper, any of those apps. But I think anonymity apps, like I remember when Secret came out, I was at Pinterest at the time, and I remember it was a ton of fun in the beginning. Like, there were just people saying things, and so they were growing their foundation. They were growing the level 1 quite well. But then what happened is I started to feel bad. Like, I didn't like using the product. It just didn't make me feel good, so I would delete it. And then maybe a month later, one of my colleagues at Pinterest would be like, hey, did you see the rumor about Dropbox and Secret? So I would download Secret again, I would install it again, and my experience in Secret would be exactly the same a month later as it was when I had first deleted it. And it's because I don't have any accruing benefits or mounting loss in that product. I could delete it, fast forward a couple months, and the same experience would happen for me, regardless of if I had, in a parallel universe, been using the product. Then, you know, Twitter also has anonymity, but they do it differently. They have a persistent identity. And so it means that because they have persistent identity, they have accruing benefits, a mounting loss, and it means that I think that they have a much more successful model for anonymity. So the third level and the last level is the self-perpetuating model. And so let's assume you've got a growing base of engaged users, and now you've got a sticky product. The question is, then, does the product become self-perpetuating? Do you create virtuous loops in the product? The strongest virtuous loop that there is a network effect. The product gets better the more people are using it. And this is the type of thing that people talk about, a flywheel. Like, you have a user who does something, it makes a better experience for all the other users, and the more you do that, the bigger the moat gets, because as you grow, you become better and better at something, and no new person can do anything about it. There are many other virtuous loops, though. There's growth in virtuous loops. So on Pinterest, if I discover a pin and I send it to my sister who's not a Pinterest user, then she might be like, oh, what's Pinterest? And actually sign up for Pinterest. And then she could do the same exact thing. So that's a growth virtuous loop. And then there's re-engagement. Like for every product, there are people who didn't come to Facebook today, amazing as that is. And if I comment on someone's status message from an old time or a photo, it will send them a push notification that brings them back onto Facebook. So that's another form of a virtuous loop. This is the hardest level to create. It is, almost like all products try to create virtuous loops in the product, but it's something that really has to be native to the experience overall. Going back to Evernote, like I'm in love with this product. They kick ass at level 1 and level 2, but at the end of the day, there's no virtuous loops in the product. When I do something on Evernote, it doesn't create any virtuous loops for anybody who's not using the product. They've tried to shoehorn chat into it. They've tried to do collaborative projects. But at the end of the day, it's just really a product that's about user value. Tinder is another, I pick on Tinder because it's kind of funny that this may or may not be true for Tinder. But online dating apps have this thing where they have some virtuous loops. So if I match with someone on Tinder, then it sends a notification to the person with whom I matched to bring them back onto Tinder to have an engagement with me. But the most important action, in a way, which is the whole point of Tinder, to have a successful date, is actually an off-ramp for this engagement flywheel, not an accelerator. And so they constantly have to work to kind of bring people in the funnel because they have this irony, which is that when they're successful, people stop using the product. They don't get more engaged. And so when you do have virtuous loops, when you have this kind of wonderful effect of having people engage with your product, it's almost like you think about all your users acting, doing things, engaging in your product. And just by doing that, they're fueling your growth. That is the most incredible place to be. Usually people have to pay money to get users to come in, to re-engage users, to get people to try the product in the first place. And here you have something where your existing users are actually doing that all for you. So that when you can hit that level, you are in a really good position to become one of these enduring businesses. So just to close up, level 1, we talked about growing engaged users and the importance of real growth, of looking at your core action. We talked about the importance of retaining users and making a really sticky product. And we talked about creating virtuous loops in your product to kind of make the company itself self-perpetuating. And if you can hit all those 3, I think you've got an incredible chance of building one of these enduring businesses. And so the thing I want you to remember is it's not just growth, really engagement is the fuel powering these businesses. Thank you.
Okay. By the way, the results for the voting are in. Split, iGrow, and People Loop. So those 3 companies will be pitching our panel of investors later on this afternoon. In the meantime, we have Slava here from Indiegogo. How many of you have actually ran a Indiegogo campaign or Kickstarter? All right. Did you get it funded? Anybody else? So the young lady who asked the question about diversity, interesting stat, 47% of funded campaigns are by women, so it's pretty equal. So they have also just launched equity crowdfunding that started, I think, on Monday. Anyway, so warm welcome to Slava, founder of Indiegogo. Okay, cool, Mike.
All right. Hello, hello. You guys hear me okay? Yeah, I didn't get to see how many hands were raised. So how many have used Indiegogo to fund or to raise? All right, good. Definitely got some people in the audience. So we're not going to talk about Indiegogo, really. We're going to talk about this thing doesn't fit on my ear very well. But we're going to talk about the 10 myths of entrepreneurship. So I've been working at Indiegogo since the beginning, and I was coming up with the idea in 2006. Do I have a clock anywhere? No? Anybody? I guess not. Just, my 20 minutes. Yes, perfect. And so it's been like almost 10 years. We launched in January 2008, so I've seen a lot of entrepreneurial experience on myself. I've also been angel investor, advisor to a bunch of companies, and probably the best experience is actually we have nearly 500,000 projects that have been on Indiegogo. Great, awesome. So we get to work with a lot of them and advise them, hear their experiences. So I'm going to give you some themes. How many of you actually want to be an entrepreneur? Raise your hand. How many of you already consider yourself, I am an entrepreneur already? Great. And how many of you are beyond like 12 months into entrepreneurship? Great. Smaller subset. All right. Well, this should be good for most of you. And if you've been, already doing all this stuff for, as long as I have, you can just come up and you'll share some of your thoughts. The idea is that when we were younger, we actually had to touch the kettle. See, when you were 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, your mother said the kettle is hot. Don't touch the kettle. But you know what? Most of the time you touch the kettle. And then you're like, oh, it was hot. So you learned, and you didn't do it again. And when you were young, if you wanted to wear a dress, you wore a dress. And then somebody told you, you maybe should wear pants instead because you're a boy. But you wore a dress because there were no limitations, right? You actually didn't know the macro social contract of what was right and what was wrong. The only thing that was in your mind is, I can do whatever I want because I'm new to this world and I have no idea what's right or what's wrong. But for some reason, as we get older, we start going through school and we start to get this sense of we're not doing it correctly. We're not actually doing it the way the other people told us we should do it. And we start to touch the kettle less. We start to say, you know what? Those other people already told me that's a bad idea, so I'm not going to do it. Or my whole way of doing this is wrong because these 5 people have already told me it's not going to work. But see, your 5-year-old self would not listen to that. Your 5-year-old self would still try that. And you know what? You might learn that what they said was totally right, just like your mother. Or you might learn that they were wrong. They were just 5 people that had experiences, and your experience is different. So we go through school, and I think that we actually not only do not get creativity, entrepreneurship, and willingness to failure is endorsed, it's actually beaten right out of us. If we don't get A's, if we don't succeed correctly, if we don't follow the exact right formula as to what it means to graduate college and get one of your 5 typical jobs, finance, legal, teacher, medical, whatever, then you have not succeeded. Because entrepreneurship, let's face it, there's no Lego character, which is entrepreneur character. There's fire person, there's doctor, there's no entrepreneur character. So I'm here to talk about my experiences and the experiences I've had with all these other entrepreneurs to help you understand just a few of our thoughts as to what are 10 myths of entrepreneurship. These are not true as fact. These are just what I've experienced. Number 1, it's all about the idea. So many people will say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have a great idea. That is garbage. Total garbage. I mean, honestly, Starbucks, I'm going to charge 10 times the price for a cup of coffee. It doesn't sound like a wonderful idea. Ideas are like a dime a dozen. Chances are, whatever bright idea you think you have, there's 10 people in America doing the same exact thing as you. And there's 100 people now globally. So your idea is kind of meaningless. What matters is the 99.9% of execution behind it. So when somebody says I don't have a good idea, say, yes, so what? Number 2, go after only the biggest markets. The classic syndrome, the 1% of China syndrome. I'm going to go after a massive market like China, and if I just get 1%, I will make a lot of money. But actually what tends to happen is you get 0%, because big market does not create big result. Getting 100% of Luxembourg, which is tiny, would actually be great compared to 0% of China. Often what happens is if you get 100% of Luxembourg, actually Belgium's going to say hello. And Germany is going to start checking out what's going on over there. Because people will start saying, whoa, that's interesting. Having a focus on whatever it is really valuable, independent of what the actual market size is, according to whatever TAM discussions are, total addressable market, for whatever VC comes to you. Sorry, Sarah, if you're still here. So, number 3, you need lots of money. Total garbage. The average small business in America will spend $8,000. Facebook started with $21,000. You do not need a lot of money to start your idea. Saying that I do not have enough money is another excuse, like I don't have a good idea. You're basically just trying to come up with reasons to not be willing to take on the challenge. On Indiegogo, you could totally raise a bunch of money. That's my only plug. But it's not about having lots of money. It's about executing and actually moving forward, learning, getting information from what you're actually doing and moving forward. You need a business plan. Okay. If this was 1988, you need a business plan. It's 2016. In my opinion, business plans should be in the library. When was the last time you actually went into a physical library? Probably not long ago. But the way these libraries work is they're broken into types of reading. So there's like nonfiction and fiction. There's an area called science fiction. Good business plans should be in science fiction. It's just like quality literature. If you write a good business plan, you should go to Hollywood. 2016, you need to actually do stuff. Like coming up to a VC or whoever and saying, I have this great idea about this app that's going to be whatever. They're going to be like, great, why don't you launch the app for $5 and figure this out with your friend who's a co-founder, and the two of you will see if you could get like 500,000 downloads in like 3 months, right? Exactly. Now, do you need like a plan, like a one-pager, a short email, a concise, here's my market, here's what I'm going after, here's my message, here's how I'm going to see if I'm doing well? Sure, but that's like 3 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs. It's like 500 words max, and that's like a lot. Often you'll hear this. I don't have the great marketing team or the right PR team. Total garbage. If you're thinking about marketing and PR before you've even launched, you're a terrible entrepreneur. The only thing you should think about is product. Do you have a product that customers will use? And even better, will they pay for it? So number 1, be product focused. Number 2, be customer focused. Then you can start thinking about marketing. Because a good product will market itself. Because people will be like, this is pretty awesome. Just think about it. Good movies don't need a lot of budget for marketing. Bad movies need a lot of marketing, so you'll be forced to go see it. Good movies, all of a sudden, just keep on going, right? Hire people like you. So you're an engineer from wherever, you're a quality marketing person from whatever, you're Hispanic, you're tall, you're short, you're fat, you're whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, people like me will be good, we'll be like able to think together, we'll be on the same page. That is the worst thing you can do. What you need is a diverse set of thinkers that will question each other. My 2 co-founders and I could not be any more different between the 3 of us. But it was good because it created a diverse set of thought. Yes, there were challenges and lots of debates and discussions, but as we hired, that was one of the tenets of making sure that we embrace authenticity. Who people are, that they should be fearless with what they talk about, they should be collaborators, and they empower. So our values are face. But it's truly important to have people that will not just fall in line with you, have yes men or yes women or whatever. You need people to challenge each other, and hopefully that's from diverse backgrounds, from diverse viewpoints, all that good stuff, diverse educations. I just hinted at this. Values don't matter until you actually get somewhere with your business. Like maybe when you have 20 employees, you should start thinking about values. You should be thinking about values before you hire anybody. Day 1, when you start talking to your co-founder or talk to yourself because you're a solo founder, like when you're talking to yourself, you're creating values. You just don't know it. And the best way to get a permanent solution is to have a temporary solution. So while you think you're not actually working on values yet, because that's not important when you have no revenue and barely have 1 download, you're in the process already creating your values. I'm not telling you what values they should be. I'm just telling you that know that you're embracing them and creating them immediately. And it'll help drive your business forward if you allow it to. That's actually my co-founder's son. So this one's pretty well known, but being an entrepreneur has its ups and downs. Sometimes it's very exciting when you get that TechCrunch announcement. Sometimes it sucks when you find out that the bank will no longer be your bank, right? It has its ups and downs. And people think that, the path towards making a huge exit, being able to be CEO and having power, being able to be speaking up here, being able to be famous, being retweeted or whatever, lots of followers, that will drive you forward because that is enough to get through the downtimes. Couldn't be any more true. See, if you want to become rich, don't become an entrepreneur. Just go become like employee 50 or 100 at some skyrocketing company. Your likelihood is much higher. If you want to be famous, go try out for like American Idol. I'm sure you'll have much higher odds. And the last thing you'll have is power. Once you start entering into entrepreneurship, you're a sucker to your employees, you're a sucker to your VCs, you're a sucker to your customers, you're a sucker to everybody. You're the person in the least amount of power. The only thing that will get you through the downtimes is passion. Is the feeling that the world needs something and I will make it. The world has a problem, whatever it is, and I will solve it. That is exciting. When you have a downtime and you're like, I'm still working on this really important problem, that drives you through those problem times. I'm telling you, I went through all that. Like, I went through the market crash. We came out with the idea in 2008, pre anybody else, pre the word crowdfunding. When the worst market crash since 1929 happens, it's not the idea of fame that drives us forward. It's the idea that access to capital should be democratized and that gatekeepers should not be able to decide whether common people should be able to raise money or invest or give money. All of you probably have similar concepts. If not, if this is one of your end results, I highly recommend you go towards a different path. Not because you can't be a good entrepreneur, but because you will hit down times and it'll be easier to exit to go to one of these things for something else. Number 9, entrepreneurship is linear. We're taught about MVP, A/B test, all these different things. Keep moving forward. I believe in all that. That's fine. But I actually believe that entrepreneurship is quite parallel, which is we're going to get a little philosophical here. We're close to our close. How many of you have seen Inception, the movie? A good amount. If you haven't, I'm about to talk about a little bit of it. I'm not really giving it away. But in Inception, there is the real world. Then there is the dream world. Then there is the meta dream world. Let's throw away the meta dream world. The only difference between the real world and the dream world, and if you don't want the spoiler, it's not a big deal, just close your ears, it's just that there's a top that spins. And in the real world, there's gravity, so it does not spin anymore. So in my opinion, being an entrepreneur is precisely the same. See, we have our dream world, which is our mind. In our mind, we have already navigated all kinds of dreams of what we expect, our future, and everything that we're going to accomplish with our entrepreneurship. And then there's the real world, one layer abstracted away. The real world is the world we live in right now, unless this is some other metaphysical abstraction. But we live in this real world. Here, the top will have gravity, and it will fall. Gravity is a metaphor. See, navigating entrepreneurship is going from your dream world in your mind to actually implementing in the real world through the limitations of gravity, your speech, who you know, what you know, how you can do things, how much money you have. These are all just limitations of transcending from the dream world to the real world. Lots of people would say, like Steve Jobs, his distortion field. We all have a distortion field. It's just a matter of how big or strong it is. You navigate from the dream world to the real world. See, bad entrepreneurs, they'll say, he's a bad entrepreneur. She's a bad entrepreneur. They failed at whatever they wanted to do. I actually think they probably had a beautiful dream, a beautiful plan, a beautiful idea. They just didn't transcend the limitations of gravity of the real world, as well as some others. And some people have done it great. And we say they're incredible entrepreneurs. I think they have the same capabilities. They've just navigated their resources and their limitations of gravity. Again, speech, their teammates, access to money, all these things in a better way. Take that for what it's worth. So then, the 10th one, my final one, which is your mother will never understand what you do. Yes, that is my mother. So I had a very good job for 8 years. I was overpaid at too young of an age, had good health insurance and all that good stuff. And then I decided to become an entrepreneur with my 2 co-founders. I became full-time Indiegogo on January 1st, 2008. I told my mom, yes, I quit my previous job and now I'm full-time Indiegogo. And she proceeded, her first point was, do they offer good health insurance? And I said, yes, mother, they offer good health insurance. Which, by the way, I had no health insurance. As a matter of fact, I didn't even have any at all for a few years, which you should not follow. But the market crashed in 2008. Move forward, late 2009. My mom's like, is this thing working that you're doing? I'm like, yeah, it's going well. She's like, why don't you just go back to your previous job or becoming an insurance salesman like next door to me? Just, something normal. And I said, oh no, it's all going great. And my mother said, how's the health insurance? And I said, still good. So just fast forward a couple years. It's now like 2012, I believe. And we had an amazing campaign on Indiegogo. Some of you might recall it. But it was about a bus monitor who got bullied by a few kids. And it was a random stranger from Canada that created a campaign to send her on vacation. They tried to raise her $5,000. It became a complete global phenomenon within a number of hours, funded in every single country. And they raised like $600,000 for this random woman. My mom calls me. We're talking like always, what did I have for dinner, whatever. And she says, Slavichka. So Ichka, I'm from Russia, Belarus, is a way to add to your name to show that I love you. So any of your names, you can just add Ichka, basically is a way of saying I love you, what's saying your name. So Jonichka, right? So it's like Slavichka. At the office, the doctors and I, she's a doctor, we're all talking about this thing that happened on the internet. What's that, Mom? Well, the nurses keep talking about it too. There's this random woman that got bullied, and they gave her lots of money. And I say, well, how did that happen? She's like, well, I don't know how it happened. It happened on the internet. And I said, interesting, on the internet. So how did that happen on the internet? She's like, Slavichka, you know I don't use the internet very much, but there was a woman that got bullied, and these people just all gave her money to send her on vacation. Well, how much did she raise? Like, over $500,000. And I said, wow. She's like, maybe I should get bullied. I'm like, Mom, come on. Take it easy. I'm like, do you know how that actually happened, though? She's like, it happened on the internet. I said, it happened on Indiegogo. She's like, Slavichka, I'm talking about the woman that got bullied on the internet. I'm like, yeah, it happened on Indiegogo. Your Indiegogo? Yes. Oh. And from then on, she understood. So those are my 10 myths. My email is just slava@Indiegogo or @GoGoSlava or slavarubin@gmail. Hope all's well.
Thanks, Slava. Awesome. Can I grab that clicker from you? Oh, yes. Okay. Next we have Mauria. Success story. Citrus Lane was acquired. So we love success stories and people who do cool stuff. So with that, Mauria, please take it away.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Mauria Finley. Quick way of background. Spent a bunch of time running product at a bunch of internet companies, but most recently I launched a startup called Citrus Lane. We did subscription e-commerce for parents. I ran it for 3 years, and it was acquired. And so my lessons today are going to be about marketing. You know, I ran a subscription e-commerce business, so they're going to bias towards transactional businesses, but I think they're applicable to lots of things. And so there's sort of the lessons learned from building, you know, at the time the brand was bought, we were doing about $12 million run rate, had really successful marketing. So, you know, a lot of people come to me and ask about marketing, and they tell me their idea, and they tell me about their marketing, and, you know, and they're very, very fixated on what I would say are the first 100 users. They're like, oh, I'm going to have great PR, and I'm going to do bloggers, you know, and I guess what I'll tell you, we're going to spend one slide on that, and that is a lovely part of the program, and it lasts for a few seconds. And during that part, you should do it. You should get as much out of PR as you can. You should get as much out of, like, friends and family, as much out of bloggers who'll do stuff for you for free. But it's all because you're new. And once you're not new, you're not news, and then you have to go to more scalable stuff. But you can totally maximize that, but it will only be the first step. But then you do marketing at scale. So the one caveat I'll say a few times during this is I'm only talking about marketing a product that already has product market fit. So, you know, you'll read lots of things about growth hacking, and they will all say, don't do any of these things until your product is actually liked by users. And I'm going to double iterate that. Don't do any, like, you know, what Sarah says about engagement, make sure all that's right first before you actually apply marketing gas. But let's say you have that, and it's now time to figure out how to go from 100 to 10,000, or to go from 1,000 to 20,000. You know, what your marketing is going to look like, it's going to be a combination of organic and paid, and it's going to be governed by math. Just like the world is governed by physics, your marketing is governed by a set of rules. So let's talk about organic. So I'll say this again, but the number one way to have organic is to have something people love. You cannot actually achieve organic if people don't, in fact, like it. So, you know, what we did is we focused a lot on the metrics behind knowing how people liked it and getting better at it. So we sent a survey out every month after the box went out. We had a huge percentage of people take them. We watched retention, we watched NPS, but, you know, first and foremost, before you get to do any marketing, make sure people love it. Then there's the part of organic that are like word of mouth. So the most simple definition of organic is people like it, so they tell someone else. You want that as much as you can get it every day to Sunday. You want to build stuff into your product that encourages someone to tell something else, so the product gets better if they tell someone else. Refer a friend. It's old, it's tried but true, but it works. So you really want a good referral program. But then I'm going to tell you about two things that I think we did at Citrus Lane that are a little more unique, and I think added quite a lot to our organic mix. And those were content and community and pictures. So content community. So we were a service for moms of children 0 to 5 years old, and we had a very active community of 500,000 moms who engaged very actively in the brand. So, and what we did is we just looked at the human psychology of what does it mean. So we had a very popular format called Calling All Moms, where a mom would ask a question, and then people would respond, and you would get hundreds of people giving advice. And it was just based on this fundamental human emotion that as a mom, the first time you experience something, you have a lot of questions and want help. And then you have this giving thing, like if it's your second kid, or even if you just finished teething a 4-month-old, you want to give back, you want to share. So this urge to give and to get was very high. We did a lot of product voting, which was very popular. Do you prefer this? Do you prefer that? And what we did is we came up with a lot of engaging content that allowed moms to interact with the brand, have the fan feel trusted, have them connect with people. These were some of the things that won for us, but we treated this like we treated paid. We tried things, and we saw what happened and what worked, and we did more of it. The other thing we did is pictures. And, you know, and this business was a year or so ago. So now if you were to do it, you'd probably overcorrect on video, given where Facebook's at. But there was a meme in our brand that after you got the box, you would take a picture of your child with the box, or you would take a picture of your child using the things in the box. And, you know, I would love to say we created the meme. We didn't create the meme. The meme created itself. But but it has some very powerful effects, and we amplified those effects. So one effect it would have is people would hear about the brand, but weren't quite ready to buy. So they would join our community, engage in the question and answers, engage in the voting, and then once a month there would be parties of thousands of pictures come out of kids being really happy with this thing. And so that created a huge amount of social proof that, like, oh, if I would have gotten this, I would have had this moment. And then it even created envy. Like, you would have like reams, hundreds of kids with pictures of this one fun thing, and you would want that. And what we did as a brand is we amplified it. Like, the users would post the pictures, and of course other users would comment, but then we would do mashups. Like, all the kids doing videos of musical instruments, we'd put into one long format. And so just playing with the pictures. And again, this is a very human emotion of, as a parent, I'm quite confident my children are the cutest kids in the world. And this is a very common sentiment, because for every parent, their children are, in fact, the cutest kids in the world. And so the urge to share their picture and then to have their picture get shared and adored by others was a big part of that. And what's interesting about these is these were not about the transaction at all. These were about the brand, about interacting with other people, about the joy, but they drove quite dramatic results in actually the transactions. So that's the organic side. And there was a lot of testing to figure out which of these worked. Now, the paid side is not, the paid side is exceptionally important, and it's really a lot of detailed work. So, what we found at Citrus Lane is we did exceptionally well on Facebook. I think a lot of brands still do very, very well on Facebook. But we tested it a lot. So we would try different ads with different offers, where an offer is like, 10% off, etc. And then we test going to different landing pages, and we test the whole flow, and we test pricing. And the trick of this is, this was a very complex test matrix. We were testing offers against each other, measuring them in terms of retention and satisfaction. We were testing conversion flows. We were testing pricing. And it was this never-ending thing where we were optimizing how efficient could we be. So, the highest level lesson I would say with paid is you're running a very analytical exercise of which platform, like Facebook, Pinterest, Pinstagram, Google, Pinstagram I made up, which offer, and then which conversion flow. So things that ended up being meaningful for us, and some of these, are obvious. We invest in mobile early, and it was very helpful. I think that at this point, that's like, you'd be crazy to not actually do everything on mobile first. Being on a platform early is very valuable. We were on Facebook early and figured it out. I mean, I think, figuring out how Instagram is working right now is very similar. Figuring out how video is being arbitraged by Facebook is very similar. And we found that it was actually very helpful to have a very big organic presence in the same medium that we had a paid presence. So even though we were spending on Facebook ads, we were doing a bunch of stuff organically to drive edge rank and reach in our community, which made our ads more effective. And then most importantly, we just analyzed it 55 ways to Sunday to figure out where it's going to be most efficient and what we can improve. Facebook worked really well for us. Affiliates worked well, and so did paid bloggers. Never worked particularly well for us was display or Google, but was probably more because we were discovery versus intent-based. So that's paid. And so then let's talk about math, because the way these come together actually is basic math, and it controls whether you have healthy marketing or quite unhealthy marketing. So the basic terms, which I assume you guys largely know a lot of these, but CAC, your cost to acquire a new customer, the full all-in cost, that cost should include everything you spend in advertising as well as any discount you give. Customer lifetime value, which is the revenue you'll get from a customer over time. Contribution margin, which is the profit after variable costs, but not including marketing, because we're going to compare marketing. And then your customer lifetime contribution. So this is where you take the revenue over time, but you just give yourself credit for the part that was the profit. And you often see people fake this. They'll show you their customer lifetime value and revenue, which is like cute and adorable, but you don't actually get to compare that to CAC. You have to compare your variable profit to CAC. So let's talk about what would be good. So there's lots of rules of thumb for this, and you can argue which is, these are fine. Better is always better, to be fair. So you want payback. So if you're going to acquire a customer, you need to get good ROI. I think a nice ROI is to achieve 3 times what you paid. So if you spend $20 all in to acquire a customer, you should get back $60 in variable profit, right? By profit, I mean, I'm not necessarily counting your fixed cost of your operation, your headcount, but I'm counting everything you need to service that customer. And then there's a big question of payback, and I'll have a slide on how to think about payback, but payback is really important because payback determines your risk profile of growth versus cash. And payback says, if I acquire a customer and pay $20, how soon do I get that $20 back? And we'll talk about that. The other things that will tell you if your business is healthy is whether your cohorts are improving. So you can often look at businesses and the first year of customers they acquired exhibited really nice signs. They were early adopters, they stayed around a long time, they bought a lot of stuff. But if your next year of customers don't act the same, that is not a great thing. So you want it to be getting better with cohorts. And then the other part that's tricky is, can you scale acquisition? What you can do when you're trying to acquire 100 customers a month may look really different than if you need to acquire 1,000 or if you need to acquire 5,000. And these are how you individually can tell if your business is good. And I will guarantee you, by the time you go out to raise Series B, maybe even A, there will be some analyst at a venture firm who will do all this on your behalf. So let's talk about them. So CAC. So what's the most interesting thing about CAC is you care about blended CAC. So the easiest way to think about this is, say you can get paid customers on Facebook for $20. But say half your customers come organically and they're free. Well, that's great. Now your blended CAC has become 10. And so this is why organic is magical. Because organic is you getting to blend in zero-cost people. So if your organic is 50% or 80%, your CAC is much, much lower. The other big way to drive CAC is conversion. If you take all the effort to give someone, they arrive at your site, either through an ad or organically. If you convert them at 2% versus 4% versus 6%, you will have radically different businesses. So driving conversion is one of your most cost-efficient ways to actually acquire customers at a reasonable price. And then there's lots of ways to run analysis on this, but the main thing to realize is that averages are very, very misleading. Like, you need to know your CAC by channel, like Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, organic. You need to know it by offer, like, did I give them 10% off? Did they come in on refer a friend? You need to know it by device, because what you'll often find when you double click into this is that your blended number may be fine, but it may be some parts perform exceptionally well, and you have some parts that really suck. And you want to start combing those out. Or you might find that you think you found this thing where you're acquiring a ton of customers and it's really cheap. But then when you look at those customers, they're actually kind of crappy customers. So it is a very tricky thing. You have to go through and make sure you really understand what you're getting. And then customer lifetime value. Customer lifetime value is harder at the very beginning, but to adjust for. But what controls customer lifetime value is the number of times they purchase, how big the average order size is, and how long they stay around for. And so you really, really want to watch this. And this comes up critically in your math because you're going to have to make an estimate. Okay, so when you go and decide to do CAC, you're going to make an estimate of how long you think they'll stay. And if you say, well, I think, based on this retention, they're going to stay 3 years. That's fine, but you may spend money assuming that, and if you're wrong, you may fall upside down. What I have found in practice is retention is often longer than you think, but you should be really careful to bet into it on early data. So cash payback. So when you think about blended CAC, and this is a really critical decision to make as a startup, which is, what do you want your payback period to be? So let's take for a second 3 scenarios. Well, one basic scenario. Something costs people's first order is $50. We believe they purchase 4 times a year, and we take 30% contribution. So if we wanted to pay back in first order, we have a $50 order, we make $15, we can spend $15. So this is pretty safe. You're going to spend $15, you're going to make $15. If they never do anything again, you're fine. And if they do anything again, it's gravy. So that's pretty safe. At the far end, we can say, you know what, I'm going to take a whole year of payback. I think I have data to make me believe they're going to purchase 4 times, thus I will spend $60. So you're going to outlay cash at $60 in January, and you hope by that December you have paid it back. This may be the right thing to do if you have enough cash and you have enough confidence, but it comes down to a question. The more you spend on CAC, the faster you will generally grow. However, if you are wrong about the tenure or the customer lifetime value, you may actually spend money you never get back. Now, there are scenarios. There's like a really good article written why Uber actually spent its way into liquidity, and that was a brilliant idea. There are times when you want to spend aggressively into an end game, but you have to really think about your cash position when you do that. And the secret is get the most data you can. Like, your understanding of customer lifetime value and customer lifetime contribution will change all the time based on the data. And so you should figure out what your parameters are, but you should update it with your data. So big levers, CAC, organic is a huge lever, good channels, good conversion. And customer lifetime value is find more things to sell them or get them to buy more in a given time. So here are the high-level lessons I found. So first and foremost, and there's no skipping this one, make a product people love. You can slog your way through a lot of stuff, but if they don't love it, you're basically guaranteed the math will never work out for you. Because your organic will be too low, your retention will be too low, all those forces will configure and they will make your product implode. It is just a mathematical certainty. So have something people love. My second lesson, and this comes from people coming and talking to me a lot, is what you think works for the first 100 customers is likely not what's going to work for the next 1,000, and is likely not what's going to work for the next 10 or 20,000. So your playbook will change, which is fine. Ride the wave you're on, get as much value as you can, but remember, you're going to have to catch the next wave. My third point is organic is your magic booster. Organic blends into your numbers like magic and makes everything work better. So have a product people love, invest in virality, find the hooks that get more people coming to you without you paying. The fourth is paid acquisition is absolutely fine. It's healthy, it's good, it's a rigorous practice, but have guardrails. Like, there are a set of financial math that will tell you if your paid is healthy or not healthy. And you're going to have to play it healthy, because you don't get to be unhealthy for very long unless you have really infinite cash. And the final point is that it's a treadmill. So, it's funny, I have a lot of people come and ask me, like, oh, how do you do marketing? What's the secret? And the truth is, there is zero secrets. Like, there are none. It is just a lot of work. And the work doesn't, like, you can't do one thing and you're like, oh, I got it. Like, I've totally nailed it. Like, I absolutely know how to acquire on this channel. It is guaranteed to change. So it is this just ongoing steady state of test, iterate, test, iterate. That's all I have. Thanks. I was exactly on my minute time, though.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Quick question. Is anybody a TaskRabbit here? Has anyone used TaskRabbit? So I wanted to give some examples of how I've used TaskRabbit. You know that stack of 2,000 business cards that you have on your desk that you always want to input somewhere? Well, the very first time I used a TaskRabbit was to input 2,000 cards into a database. I've used it for delivery. I've used it for handyman services. So pretty much anything that you need to do that you suck at, you can get a TaskRabbit for. And leading the charge of the rabbits is Leah. Leah, come on down. And we have Laura from USA Today who's going to be doing the interview. Right. Welcome, ladies. We have a pregnant Leah here.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I'm bigger every day. Okay, so we have 20 minutes. So, Leah, you have an interesting history. You started your company in 2008, which I think is considered the winter of fundraising. Mm-hmm. And as people in this room probably are aware, it's gotten a little colder recently. So Tell us how it feels compared to then, and how was it to start in a year where people were not so generous with granting investments?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time. I feel like from 2008 to today, I really have seen the entire cycle, right? When I first left my job at IBM to start the TaskRabbit site, it was in June of 2008. By September, I had built the site and got it launched, but that was right when we were going to this tough economic downturn. So I didn't really plan very well, so to speak, to start a business and to have to fundraise money. And really no one was writing checks at the time, particularly early stage, an unknown entrepreneur, an idea that, was nascent, had never really been done before. I heard a lot of stories about Cosmo.com or My Lackey, from sort of the early 2000s and 90s. And so it was a really tough time. Now, what I loved about that time, though, is that companies that really did have a great idea and a great business model, they were able to get funding. It was really hard, and it was really hard for TaskRabbit. And, I sort of, right before I raised my seed round of funding, it was literally day to day, like, should I keep going? Does this make sense? But we got the round done, and I joined an incubator program that Facebook was running in the summer of 2009, and so I got to meet a lot of other companies at a similar stage in time and saw what their fundraising process was like, and it was hard for everyone. Fast forward a few years, we raised the majority of the money that we've done, which is $50 million, in the 2011, 2012 timeframe, and that was a time where it was just really, really easy to fundraise, right? And people were writing checks left and right, and the valuations were very high. And, we're definitely seeing the market come back down now, for sure. And I think now what I'm hearing that's important, and what I've always believed is important, are positive unit economics, path to profitability, good gross margins, really creating a business that is sustainable. And I think somewhere in the middle of this market, a lot of companies got lost in sort of the hype and the money, and they weren't creating sustainable businesses. So I'm really actually appreciative of where we started and when we started, because I think that it really taught us to be disciplined with our capital and create a really sustainable long-term business.
So, and you think you're expecting to be profitable this year?
That's right. Yeah.
But even when fundraising was much more available, you had to retrench, right? You had some layoffs in 2013, and you also significantly changed your business model in terms of going from an auction-based pricing for your taskers to hourly, which was not without some controversy, I think. But can you tell us about how changing that fundamental part of the cost model helped you sort of maybe extend your runway?
Yeah, I think this is a great example of, this was a time when we had a lot of cash in the bank. We had just come off, I think, the Series B or Series C round of funding. We had a lot of money in the bank, but we saw the growth curve, and although we were growing, we knew that we could grow faster, and we felt like if we retrenched and reorganized and put out a product that was more sort of up to date with what the consumer experience required at that time, we could grow even faster. And so remember, 2008, iPhone had just come out. No one was really using location-based technologies. We were very, very early. And so we started with this auction-based bidding model because that's sort of what I knew. That was what was familiar. eBay was doing very well. But over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 years, the consumer mindset really shifted to a more on-demand, streamlined mobile experience. And so we saw that coming, and we knew that the path that we were on product-wise, it just wasn't going to get us there fast enough. So we reorganized the team, we hired more mobile engineers, we completely rebuilt the product from scratch, like threw away code and started over. And we launched a new mobile experience in a new test market, London, which was also very strategic because we wanted to test this new product model in a market where no one had really heard of us before, so that we could really understand if it was going to work. And so we launched in London in, I think it was like November of 2013. And we left the US market alone. We let the US market continue to run with the auction-based bidding product. And we did this A/B test of London versus the US market. And what we saw was London growing much, much, much faster than any city in the US. Conversion rates were higher, unit economics were better, taskers were making more money. It was just more efficient all around. Net promoter score, the happiness of the users were much, much higher. So we were really confident that the right call for the business was to migrate this product back to the US market. Now, not without controversy, because you take millions of customers, 30,000 taskers, and you tell them, we're going to completely change the way you do business. Not everyone's going to be happy, right? So what I'm really glad that we did, though, is we got the proof points and we got the data in the London market, so we knew it was going to work. And so sort of the vocal minority that didn't like the new product experience, that liked the auction bidding-based model, we knew it was a tiny group, and even though they were vocal at the time, we knew that we could push through it and the business would be better for it. So it was a tough decision. It wasn't easy. But in the end, you know, our mobile usage has increased, you know, threefold over the last year, over the last 12 months. We've been growing double digits month over month for the last 12 months. And so it was just something that we had to do as a business, and we did. And I think that because we started in 2008 at a time where it was tough to raise capital, it was a tough economic time, we kind of have this DNA about us that we're not afraid to make tough decisions and make hard decisions that we know are going to be better for the long-term sustainability of the business.
Now, also during that time, the gig economy has really gone through several stages. I mean, some people saw this as the new coming, and then I think others, you know, think that it's going to implode on itself. Those are two ends of the spectrum, of course. But, I mean, for instance, just to throw out some news points here, Uber, for example, just entered into a $100 million settlement with its drivers over whether, with some of its drivers over whether they were independent contractors or employees. And the question hasn't been resolved by the courts. HomeJoy is an example of a company that started off with an independent contractor model, and lawsuits related to that are believed to have been why it had to fold. So, but you have stayed with the independent contractor model. Why is it, and what do you do about these very real criticisms that employees are not protected by labor laws? They are not really making enough to live on. And you know, whatever your politics may be, you may deal with dissatisfaction as some of these more temporary workers migrate into the full-time workforce.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hot topic right now. So a few things. So one, you know, when I founded the company in 2008, really my vision was to create a new way for people to work. I saw that we were going into this tough economic time, that people were looking for flexibility in their income, in their schedules. They were looking to make ends meet in between jobs. Now, what's happened as the economy has improved, that mindset, that trend of the freelance economy, of the future of work, that hasn't changed. It's only increased and become more prominent. 34% of Americans today consider themselves freelance contractors. Not all of them are in the gig economy, right? The gig economy accounts for a much, much lower percentage, 2-3% right now. But there is a trend here of the future of work that is changing. And so, you know, we have kept our independent contractor status because as we look at our tasker community, we've spent a lot of time asking them, what is important to you? Above anything else, it's always been flexibility in schedule. And it's always been, I want to choose who I want to work for, at what time, and the price that I'm going to get hired at. So we're set up very different from a lot of other companies who set their own prices. TaskRabbit is one of the only marketplaces that allows its independent contractors to really set up their own businesses, set up their own hourly rates, opt into up to 40 different categories to get hired in. So we've spent a lot of time focused on the tasker side, building tools, resources in a community around what is going to be helpful to them. I never wanted to create a cleaning company. I never wanted to create a handyman service. I always wanted to create a platform where people could find new ways of working and really share the skills and services that they have. So it's a very different mission and a very different model, and I think that's also one of the big reasons why we've sort of remained outside of this lawsuit, sort of legal arena, because we are set up infrastructure-wise just very differently than some of these other companies. Now, I believe that it's not a binary decision between having benefits, having safety measures, and having a community of independent contractors. I think we can do both. I think that the model of labor is something that needs to be sort of rethought for this century. And so one of the things, as an example, that we're doing at TaskRabbit is providing all of our taskers in the community with discounts on healthcare, with access to discounts to transportation, to cell phones, anything they need to build their business to do their job better. We want to do more. And we've started to kind of butt up against the laws and how much we can provide to our taskers to be a resource. Like a great example is training. We'd love to offer our taskers training and career development. Say there's a handyman tasker that loves painting, but also wants to learn how to, mount flat screen TVs, because that's a really lucrative, area to get hired in. We want to be able to offer, videos, courses, training to help that tasker build out their service capability and get hired in more ways. But right now, the way the labor laws are set up, that would be very much a gray area in us providing that training. So we're working with congressmen, with senators, with lobbyists to figure out how we can continue to cultivate a strong, long-term, sustainable community that is safe, that does have benefits, but that also has the flexibility that these taskers want and are looking for.
What is the biggest hurdle or pressure on your margins? I mean, is it as you begin to provide more of an infrastructure? Is it engineering talent?
I really see TaskRabbit not so much as a tech company. It's really a people operations business. When you utilize TaskRabbit, how many people here have used TaskRabbit, the app? Fair amount of folks. So if you've used TaskRabbit, you don't think about, I just used the app and how great it was and easy to connect with the tasker. That's all good. That should work. But what you tell people is, I met this wonderful tasker and he did this job for me and he was so great. And you remember the interaction you had with that person. It's all about the people operations behind it. So, our team is relatively small overall. We're 60 people total. Most of us in San Francisco. We have a small office in London running operations there. Our engineering product design team makes up a little more than a third of that. It's really the operational side, the community, the recruiting, the engagement, the matching that goes on, that really makes, I think, for a high quality, consistent experience every time.
Now, you had another change just earlier this year. You stepped aside as CEO, you're executive chairman now, and Stacy Philpott Brown, right, is the CEO. Now, she came on from Google 3 years ago, and she's got a lot of initiatives. She's also rare in the sense that she's an African-American woman who's leading a tech startup in an industry that has a very established track record of not having as many women and underrepresented minorities. And then we noticed that you just signed on to a Black Congressional Caucus initiative to increase the number of African Americans and Latinos, and you're disclosing your numbers. So I wanted to talk to you about, first of all, just the decision to step aside but still be involved as the founder. What's that like, and what did you have to kind of do to let go?
Yeah, well, it's something I'd been working on for quite a while with Stacy, something we've been talking about for a long time. It has been 8 years that I have founded and been running the company. We've scaled up in a tremendous way. The business in the last 12 months has grown over 300%. And so the business is in a very strong place. And so as Stacy and I were chatting, I brought her on 3 years ago as Chief Operating Officer. I knew that I wanted a strong business leader and a business partner for myself whose real passion and background is product design and engineering. And so I brought Stacy on board out of Google. Her and I had met about a year and a half earlier. And so it was a long time that we've known each other. And so over the course of the last 3-4 years that we've known each other, we started talking about what it would look like as the business hit scale, as we approach profitability, things that, I want to do and I'm passionate about, and areas that she wants to develop in her career as well. And we just felt like now was a great time to do this transition. And the team, is really excited, knows Stacy very well. Of course, I want to stay involved as the founder. This has been my baby for the last 8 years. So I'm still there and around and in the office. But one thing that's always been really important to both Stacy and myself has been building a culture around diversity. I think we've been very fortunate that, we've had 2 female C-level execs in the company for so long. There's very few startups that have 2 C-level women, running the company to start with. And so when we made the decision that it was time to do the transition and have Stacy step in, we also thought it'd be a great time to run some more diversity initiatives. And we're using the partnership we did with the Congressional Black Caucus as a model, really. We see that as a template that we can use to kind of go out to other minority groups, to other areas where we want to build more diversity and create these types of partnerships. I think building awareness, building partnerships, collaborating with others in this space that have expertise on how to bring more people into the pipeline, how to hire better for diversity is really important. It's not something that you can just do on your own with your own network. You really need to expand your network. And so, we've actively taken steps to do that all along, and it's certainly something we're going to continue to support and grow as we move forward.
Now, you were just at your college and giving the commencement speech, and, related to the hiring and diversity, the long-held reason given, although I think many people would argue with it, but is the pipeline. Well, there's not enough women, or women leave tech. In that speech, you exhorted the graduates to have big, hairy, ambitious or audacious goals. I can't read my own writing here. And I'd like you to expostulate about that. And I mean, I think particularly for somebody who, did you think you would be in tech, and would you stick it out? And how do you talk to people who may not feel like that's the route for them, but you perhaps see where it is the more open field?
Yeah, I spent 8 years at IBM as a programmer. And when I was at IBM, I really enjoyed my time there. And I thought, this is a great company. I can spend my career here. And, one day I had this idea for TaskRabbit. And it just really captured my mindset. And I became really passionate about it. I think I've always been the type of personality that, does have a big vision and does have big goals. I think the challenge and what TaskRabbit has really taught me is, how do you break that down into smaller steps to get there? And I think so many times people, men and women, can get wrapped up in all the things that can go wrong and, how big and hairy those audacious goals can be. But I think if you have those goals, but keep in mind, every day, little things that you can do to move that goal forward, to get pointed in the right direction. And it doesn't have to be tech. It could be, any aspect of your life. That, for me, in the last 8 years has been a big learning. It makes me feel like, no matter what it is, people can really tackle anything. And just being able to break it down into smaller pieces and make progress every day is what it's all about.
So big, hairy, audacious goals and little hairy steps.
That's
Is
right.
that-
Little tiny hairy steps.
I don't know if we had time for questions. I didn't see the card. No, that's it. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, you should definitely find Leah. What's the best way to contact you?
I'm on Twitter, LA Busque. I'd love to chat. Yeah.
Okay. Let's give her a hand.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, that was cool. All right, so next we have Hana Mandapat, Director of Marketing from Desk.com. And we usually don't do corporate presentations, but I think a lot of startups don't think about what it means to deal with customers and customer service. So I thought this was really interesting. So Hana, please, come on down. All right.
Thank you. I think I have a mic, yeah. Yes, I do need a clicker. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Hana Mandapat. As Nima mentioned, I'm a director of marketing for Desk.com, which is Salesforce's out-of-the-box help desk solution for small businesses. So in my day-to-day role, I own our customer engagement. So what that means is I'm talking to our customers every single day, and most of our customers are startups just like you. So they're looking to use customer support as a lever for growth. So that's what I'm learning from them. That's what I want to share with you today, is all those learnings that I've heard from our customers, and also how they're surviving in today's do-it-for-me economy. Again, we'll get into that a little bit later, but there's a lot of key learnings there that you can take for your startup and apply it to how you're building your customer experience. All right, so who remembers when this is the only way to get around town? I mean, you might look at me and say, like, what does she know about it? But I'm an old millennial. That is a thing, different talk. But basically, I do remember how much pain this caused me when I was younger and trying to go out. So when I lived in San Francisco, I lived in the Bayview district. So if any of you are familiar with the city, you'll know it's about a 15-minute cab ride from the Bayview into downtown. And on a Saturday night, if I wanted to go out, I had to call Yellow Cab, I had to talk to a dispatcher, I had to pray and hope like they would send me a car. And even if they did send a car out, it would take about an hour just to get there. So needless to say, I didn't go out a lot. I didn't get to do the things I wanted to do because this experience was so horrible. But now that concept, that anxiety that I felt, it's foreign to all of us. There's an app for that. There's 5 or 6 apps for that now. And you use something like Uber, you use something like Lyft, and you could book a car. You can see exactly where your driver is. You can pay them all from your phone. So much more convenient, such a better experience. But it's not just hailing a cab anymore. It's almost every aspect of our lives has been taken over by what I like to call the do-it-for-me economy. And what that means is now you can pull out your phone, pull out an app, and in a couple taps, you're hailing a cab. You're getting a freshly cooked meal delivered right to your doorstep. Or you're even booking a hotel for the same night. And these companies, if you think about it, they're not doing anything revolutionary. These industries have been around for a long time. But what they've changed is the experience around these things. So we as consumers, we use these apps all the time, not just because they make our lives easier and we're lazy, maybe a little bit me, but again, it's that experience that comes with it that we like and that we crave and that makes it so much easier for us to use. And that's why these companies are winning. And they're building the next biggest companies with huge valuations because they've chosen to focus on the customer experience. So for startups, you really need to pay attention to what these companies are doing right in this do-it-for-me economy. So here's another old millennial factoid, okay? So when I was a kid growing up, we used to have people come to the house and try to sell my family stuff. I think the cool thing was like a vacuum. It was a rainbow vacuum or something. You put like smells into it and it made your house clean and it smelled good. So a really cool thing. But what the salespeople would try to do, if you were on the fence, you weren't sure if you want to buy this vacuum, was they'll throw in a set of steak knives, right? So win-win, vacuum and steak knives. Go figure. But today, people don't care about the steak knives. They don't care about how many different versions your product comes in. They don't care about how cheap you can sell it. They care about how they feel when they're talking to your customer or to your support team. They care about how they experience your brand. And as a startup, you really have an advantage over larger companies because you're agile, you can move quickly, and you can embed that customer-first mentality into your growth strategy from the very beginning. If you think about it from the very beginning, it's a lot easier to grow that and scale that versus trying to get it in there once you have your customers on board. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about 3 ways that you can learn from this do-it-for-me economy and these successful companies and how you can apply that to your customer experience. So the first thing is around connecting your data. When you think about customer experience, it's really the sum of all touch points that you have with your customer. So you might think when a customer is reaching out to you on a website, or if they're emailing you, or if they're calling you, they are constantly forming opinions about your company, especially when they need help. So when you deal with a customer who needs help and they have an issue, they don't care what time it is. They don't care what channel they're reaching out to you on. They just know that they need you to fix their problems. They need you to do it right now. And we see this a lot in large companies where there is information that lives in different systems, different places where you can find information about the customer, and that doesn't work. Having a siloed team and having siloed information isn't going to work with today's customers. They expect you to know who they are. They expect you to know why they're calling. They expect you to know when was the last time they've called, and they expect you to not have to explain that to you. So again, being a startup and being able to connect those systems from the beginning is really crucial. So as you're looking into solutions for your business, don't just look at ones that are right for your business, but look at ones that can integrate easily with each other, so that when your sales team is getting in front of a customer, they know that they had a recent service issue. Or when your service team is helping someone, if there's a big deal on the table, they know maybe they have to get that extra white glove treatment out for them. The second point is around empowering your customer support team to deliver personalized experiences. So we talked a lot about how customers' expectations have changed today, but on top of that, the role of your support team has also changed dramatically. If you think about it, customer support is the first frontline defenses when a customer has a problem. They're talking to your support team. They're the first people that they encounter when it comes to your brand. So having a one-size-fits-all strategy doesn't apply to them. Again, your customers are reaching out to you on email, they're tweeting at you, they're calling you, they're filling out web forms, whatever it may be. You not only have to be on those channels and respond quickly, but you also have to empower your support team to go above and beyond. Because as a small company, a lot of times you have a lot of competitors, and a lot of those competitors are larger companies. So customer service is really where you can differentiate yourself and really provide that experience. So by giving your agents the tools they need to maybe offer a discount or free shipping when there's an angry customer, or being able to give them a solution that allows them to look into the trends and the different things that your customers are asking for and use that as a way to provide a better experience to your customers, that's what's going to set them up for success with your customers. And finally, we're going to talk about how you use support data to build a roadmap. So how many of you in the room have a mobile app or a SaaS app for your company? Okay, good amount of you. So you all know the importance of having a product roadmap. But at the same time, you also know how difficult it can be to actually build that. So for a startup, really, it's important to have this roadmap in place. It could be the difference between sink or swim. What do I build? When do I build it? Am I building something that my customers actually want? These are all questions that you're thinking about when you're thinking about your roadmap. And with large companies, they can hire, research firms and conduct user groups so they can actually hear directly from customers what it is they want. But how do you do that when you're a startup? You don't have resources. You don't have a big budget to buy, user groups or to buy a research firm to help you with user groups. But the good news is that you already have this data. It's just hidden. It's in your support cases. So looking at your support cases can be a gold mine of information for you as you're building your product roadmap. This can tell you what are the things your customers like about your product, where are their pain points, how can you do better? And by using that data, you can then use that to inform your product roadmap. So it's important for you to find a solution that allows you to kind of dig into the insights, dig into the data that you're getting from your customers, and use it in a way that's actionable, so that you're not only providing a great customer experience, but you're providing a great product experience too. All right, so we talked a lot about customer experience today, but if there's one thing that you should take away from this session, it's that customer experience is the single most important differentiating factor in business today. If you're a company that's large or small, again, start early. Now is the time to start thinking about this. Think about your systems. Think about what you're using and how does all this come together to provide a cohesive customer experience for your company. Like Nima mentioned, we're out there on the booth. We have a booth out there. Our team's there, and we'll be happy to talk to you if you're having any questions about starting your customer experience. But start now, do it while you're young, and trust me, it'll grow with you, and it'll be better in the long run. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Hana. Our next speaker is confused. He was an entrepreneur, then he was a VC, then he was an entrepreneur again, now he's a VC again. And he must be super, super smart because he was CTO at Hulu, and now he's at Kleiner Perkins. With that, I want to welcome Eric. Eric, come on down. So what makes you go back and forth?
Oh, man, I guess I really can't make up my mind.
Well, I'm sure you'll have some stories to tell. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you guys very much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day, especially with the gorgeous sunshine outside. It's a great day. I know you're stuck in here with the likes of me, but hopefully you get some time to go outside and enjoy the nice, beautiful weather we have today. So my name's Eric Feng, and very thrilled to be here today. Actually, I don't have a clicker, so I'm gonna like do hand signals, and hopefully the slides will advance. Next slide. Look at that. That's pretty cool, right? So I've had the pleasure of working at a bunch of really awesome companies that I was just really lucky to be a part of. Places like Microsoft and Hulu. I'm now at Kleiner. We're a venture capital firm on Sandia Road that's been around for about 44 years. And at Kleiner, I focus on early stage consumer investing. But the career experiences that I'm actually most proud of are my times as an entrepreneur. So I wanted to share just a couple of quick entrepreneurial stories, and then which will be kind of boring, but then we'll get to really interesting stuff, hopefully, which is really what we're seeing in terms of trends in the tech industry, trends in startups, and things that can hopefully be helpful to all of you as you pursue your entrepreneurial adventure. But quick question before we start. By show of hands, who here is an entrepreneur at a startup, planning to start a company? Nice. I love it. Well, then hopefully some of these stories will resonate, and it'll be a fun, quick session for us together. Next slide. All right. First bullet. So I've had the fortune of starting 3 companies in my time, and was able to sell them all. And the first company I started was back in 1999. It was called UberWorks. We were building some technology that was powering e-commerce sites. And we ended up selling that to a public company called Network Commerce. And I was one of 3 founding engineers on the team, and what I learned from that experience is just how much fun it is to build things. So when I was at UberWorks, they called me the 10-minute guy, because every time there was a problem, I'd say, give it to me, I'll fix it in 10 minutes. And it would never take 10 minutes. It would take probably 10 hours or even 10 days. But the thing that was really exciting about startup was just the irrational confidence and the irrational energy that you have to build things when you're in that startup environment. And I love that. I just learned to really appreciate that. And then the next company I had the fortune of doing was called Mojiti. I actually started this company when I was in China. So it was a small startup in China, and then we were doing online video technology. We ended up selling this company to Hulu. And what I learned from this adventure was how much fun it is to build consumer products. So not to knock anyone in this room that's doing enterprise products. Enterprise products are awesome. But the thing that I think is really special about consumer products is that when you're doing consumer products, you end up designing and building something that your users can have an emotional connection with. And that's really powerful. It's very intoxicating. Before Mojiti, I focused a lot actually on the enterprise side. For example, when I was at Microsoft Research, I was looking into new technology around storage engines and query processors, which is fun, but it's not every day when you're kind of walking up down the street and the barista at the local coffee shop tells you how much they love your query processor. And actually at that time, my mother is a IBM DB2 administrator. My father is an Oracle DBA, and I was working on some technology that was going to SQL Server. So we had some of the most boring dinner room conversations ever for the holidays. But contrast that with the experience of Hulu and getting to work with things like people's favorite TV shows and the movies that they love. It was just a very different experience. And I think that's what really makes consumer products special, is that emotional connection that your users can have with the things that you build. And then, next advance, the last company I had the fortune of starting was called Early. And I got to incubate that inside of Kleiner Perkins in 2011. And what I really loved about Early was this process of going from 0 to 1, from just an idea on the back of a napkin or scribbling on a whiteboard and taking that to an actual finished product. So when we started Early, we actually didn't even know what we were doing. I was at Kleiner and just knew that I wanted to get back to building. So went about this fun adventure of incubating something inside of Kleiner, working with my partners to figure out what would be an interesting idea, an interesting product area to pursue. Ended up building that and just taking it from that 0 conceptual phase to actually a product phase, that 1 phase. So those are the 3 lessons that I really take with me every day from my startup adventures. And next slide. I'm fortunate in that now at Kleiner, this is what I do every day. I help great entrepreneurs like all of you out there help take your consumer products from 0 to 1. I focus, I'd say 99% of my time on consumer, and there's other great partners at Kleiner that focus on enterprise and life sciences and different fields, but I try to stick to the consumer side. And again, that early stage, going from 0 to 1. And during the last, I'd say, 6 years that I've been looking at companies either through the lens of an operator at a startup or through the lens of an investor investing in startups, the last 6 years, I think a couple of trends have emerged. And I wanted to focus most of our time today covering those 3 trends. The first is that anything now can be built faster and cheaper than ever before. And I'll get into some hopefully illustrative examples of why that is. The second is consumer, especially getting consumer traction. It's harder than ever before. I know maybe it comes off as woe is me, the guy focusing on consumer stuff. We got it so hard on the consumer space. But I actually do believe that consumer companies are harder than ever before to build. And we'll get into a couple of reasons of why. But finally, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be building startups or you shouldn't be building consumer startups, because there's still a ton of very exciting things that are going on that we should all be pretty energized about. So why don't we get into that first thing? Anything now can be built faster and cheaper than ever before. Next slide. So I love this quote from author Matt Ridley. He wrote this book called The Rational Optimist, and he says, this definition of prosperity: the increase in the amount of goods or services you can earn with the same amount of work. I'll give you an illustrative example of that. So about 200 years ago, if you worked for 1 hour, you toiled in the field, or you actually did your job 200 years ago for 1 hour, you could purchase about 15 minutes of light, because that's how expensive light was. Today, if you work for about an hour, whether you are programming at your desk, you're filing accountant reports, you're waiting tables, you're making coffee, whatever it is you're doing, you work for about an hour, you can purchase enough light for an entire year. Because we are all far more prosperous. We are more prosperous, largely in part due to technology, but that's an example of prosperity. Now, on the product side, we are also much more prosperous as well. I'm going to give you an example of 3 consumer products and measuring them in terms of resources that were spent investing in them, and also in the time that it took to build them. So, first product, Microsoft Word. Back in 2000, it's actually right when I joined Microsoft, I worked on some technology that actually went into Microsoft Word 2000. And back then, this product took about 300 engineers and about 2 years to build. And this was actually considered an excellent, well-run product release schedule. It wasn't that late. It was very buttoned up, on time, on resource. It was a really well-executed product at Microsoft. Fast forward 7 years, Hulu was a product that I actually got to build firsthand. I wrote, maybe about a third of the front-end code of Hulu myself. And that product release, our first version, it took about 30 engineers and only 3 months. Then fast forward to 2010, Here's a little product that I got to look at when I was at Kleiner, and we were scouring great startups to invest in. And I got to meet Kevin and Mikey, and they showed me Instagram, and it took them 3 people and about 6 weeks to build. Just an example of how fast products are getting created and the resource down curve. Now, the thing I didn't put up here is the cost involved. So Microsoft Word, you could measure in hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of the resources that went into that product. Hulu was probably in the single-digit millions, maybe 10 if you added it all together. And then Instagram is literally, you can measure that in tens of thousands of dollars in terms of how much cash they had to outlay into building that product. And the key things are, not only is it fast, you can see the time scale is very different, but the cost involved in terms of people and dollars is a fraction of what it used to be just not that long ago. And what this has allowed to happen is, if you have an idea for a product, it can be built. Technology is no longer the defensible moat that it used to be. In years past, just building a product could be necessary and sufficient because no one else could build it. It was that hard and that expensive to do things. Today, building a product, it's certainly necessary. It is by no means sufficient because very quickly, other people can build a similar product, maybe even a better product, and they can do it faster and cheaper than you can possibly predict. And that's a really intriguing trend that's happened that's made entrepreneurship both super exciting because it's made it accessible to a lot of people, but also very difficult because of how competitive and crowded it is. So that's one trend that we've seen. Next slide. Now, everyone talks about how hard it is to get consumer traction, but I just wanted to illustrate that with 2 screenshots of the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So this first slide is the Apple App Store, and the next slide will show us the Google Play Store. But if you look at this, what you'll see is that it's dominated by 2 things. One is incumbent apps, YouTube, Facebook, Messenger, Pandora, Uber, Spotify. I mean, big, massive incumbent apps dominated. The other thing that's dominated by is games. And games are largely pay to play in terms of getting on this chart. Becoming a top app, the games buy installs. So because of that, it's just really hard for a non-game and a non-incumbent to get any sustained distribution through the App Store. This is an example of the Apple App Store. So let's look at the next slide, which is the Google Play Store, and you see the exact same trend. You see that it's dominated by incumbents and it's dominated by games. Those are the 2 categories of apps that get distribution through the App Store, through these top charts, where a lot of people go to find out what to install. So why is that? Why is there so little movement? Why is distribution now so hard, as measured by these 2 screenshots of the App Store? Well, we believe that there's really 2 reasons for that. The first is that mobile, and in many ways the web platform, they're now getting quite mature. And what I mean by that is that the low-hanging problems, a lot of them have been solved and solved pretty sufficiently. So 10 years ago, taking and sharing a photo was really, really hard. It was cumbersome for the user. Getting directions to a coffee shop, first finding the coffee shop and then getting directions to that coffee shop was actually really hard 10 years ago. Finding a piece of video to watch and getting to consume it on the go, on demand, was really, really hard 10 years ago. Today, those problems are pretty well solved. Yes, maybe they could be a little bit better, but we're talking about thinking of single percentage points improvements in those problems that you encounter every day. As opposed to 10 years ago, you're talking about order of magnitude improvements that you could create through technology. So platforms are mature, and there are what we call good enough solutions everywhere. So that's one reason why we think that consumer traction is hard. The other reason is that these incumbents that we see today, they are some of the smartest and best companies I think that have ever existed. It's hard to imagine someone sneaking up on Google or sneaking up on Amazon or sneaking up on Facebook and surprising them. It's just really hard. These entrepreneurs that founded these companies and the executives that they brought in and the teams and the data and how nimble and fast they are, it's something that we've never seen before in terms of the dominant position. So because of that, the incumbents now are very careful about upstarts. When they see something, they can go directly compete with it, or maybe they go acquire it before it has a chance to get to scale. But because of that, it's really hard to imagine someone sneaking up on one of these companies. So when you add those 2 things together, dominant incumbents that are really smart, plus not a kind of a dearth of low-hanging, simple problems to go off and solve, it just makes creating a solution that can get consumer traction really, really hard. So what does that mean? Should we all just kind of hang up, maybe just go focus on enterprise stuff, like find other careers to do, other lines of work? Thankfully, no, because there's still a ton to be excited about, and I see amazing startups every day, and wanted to share now a couple of interesting trends that we've been seeing. So next slide. So here are 3 trends that I've been really focusing on Kleiner Perkins and that we've been seeing in the industry. And I'm going to share some stats from my partner Mary Meeker's Internet Trends Report. How many folks here have read Mary Meeker's Internet Trends Report? Oh, not that many hands. It is an amazing report. You should definitely read it. There's actually a new version of that for 2016 coming out in just a couple of weeks. It'll blow your mind. It's amazing. But here are 3 trends that we've been observing very closely for the last 12 to 24 months. The first is around urbanization. So when you bring people together in denser and denser pockets, you create interesting networks and interesting density that can allow new businesses and new services to emerge. So that's one. Second, millennials. Everyone's terrified of millennials. Millennials are taking over the world. You know, we're doomed because it's all about the millennials. But what's really interesting is that millennials have very different consumption behaviors that create new business opportunities. And we'll get into that in a second. And last is there are still interesting interaction models that are being created every day that we think can launch brand new startups and businesses as well. So why don't we start with urbanization? This is a slide from Mary's report, and what you can see is that there's a massive shift towards urbanization that's been happening over the last 100 years, and it's sustaining. It's not a blip. It's not a trend like, hey, everyone kind of moved to the city as a fad, but 2 years from now, that's going to go away. This is a dominant, here to stay change of consumer behavior, change of living behavior, and it's even more pronounced. The curve of change is even more pronounced outside the U.S. But because we are now more urban and we now have greater urban density, this allows us to do a lot of things like the next slide around on-demand services as an example for how to take advantage of urban density. So now there are tons of amazing on-demand services that fulfill almost every need within about an hour. Here are all examples of things that you can do in about an hour. Pretty amazing. So this is one example of how a shift in living behavior towards more urban, dense environments has created brand new business opportunities for great consumer companies. And there are going to be a lot more. As urban density continues to increase, there's going to be other business opportunities that follow along. Next slide. So now let's get into millennials. So people think of millennials as this big demographic, which it is. Huge demographic in the United States. And we define millennials as people roughly between the ages of 15 and 35. But more excitingly, millennials are actually the single largest workforce in the United States. Workforce. So not only are they a big demographic, but they're a demographic with buying power. So you got these new people with different ways of thinking that have buying power. Pretty potent. And what are they doing differently? Well, let's look at the next slide as an example. They consume media very differently. So millennials consume about 3 times as much media on demand than through linear models like television. So instead of watching just live TV linearly, they prefer to watch things on demand. That's the chart on the left. Look at the chart on the right. An exciting thing about millennials too is that the people they find influential are very different. On the right is this thing called the Q score that Variety puts out every year, targeted at teenagers to find out which celebrities influence them. And if you look at this, there's only 3 traditional media celebrities in the top 12. The other 9 are new media celebrities, people that have emerged on Vine and Instagram and YouTube. People like Ryan Higa and PewDiePie, and probably names that a lot of people in this room don't even know, but they're incredibly influential. So this is an interesting new phenomenon that if you see how millennials are consuming differently, you could create new services that target them, things that provide media on demand, things that provide mattresses sent through the mail, like Casper. You can imagine 10 years from now, a millennial will never have gone into a mattress warehouse. They'll never have gone into a mattress store. They'll only have purchases through a new brand like Casper. So millennials consume things differently, such as media, and that creates new interesting opportunities. And then the last example that I'll give is around new user interfaces. So as I mentioned, there are now good enough solutions for most of the low-hanging problems out there. And what this has created is that in order to get any consumer adoption, good enough is no longer good enough. You have to be better enough. That's what we call it. You have to be better enough. You can't just kind of like half-ass it because it was so broken before that consumers will accept any solution. That's no longer the case. I think you have to focus on better enough solutions. And an example of that in this next slide is around voice-controlled conversational interfaces. So look at what used to be acceptable in the world of controlling your media. Having 12 remote controls that with terrible user interfaces and these terrible displays that you had to navigate through in a very cumbersome way, that's no longer good enough. We're looking for better enough. And better enough are things like Alexa, when you can actually just talk to your media agent. So this is an example of applying technology in a really interesting, innovative way around new interfaces, which we think is still a huge opportunity. So I just wanted to point out 3 trends that we're super excited by at Kleiner, and leave you with one last thing, which is that there is truly no greater rewarding professional experience than starting companies and going along your entrepreneurial journey. I've vacillated between being an entrepreneur myself to being an investor working with entrepreneurs, but I think the key trend through all of that is just my love of spending time with great startups and great founders. I think that is so rewarding, and I'm super excited to continue to do that, and I hope that I have a chance to work with all of you today. And again, thank you very much for taking the time here today.
Thank you, Eric. He's super smart. I want to pick his brain. Our next interview is with Maren. If any of you had heard of Zirtual, which was basically a personal virtual assistant, I was a customer. I thought it was great. The story behind Maren is 7 years ago, 6.5, 7 years ago, I was part of Founder Institute, and she had applied to be in the program. And Adeo said, no, I'm not going to let her in. And she had sent in a video. At that time, I think she was living in Reno. And she said she would be willing to commute from Reno to Palo Alto for the sessions. So anybody who's willing to commute from Reno to Palo Alto is a soldier. And long story short, Zirtual was doing well. And I think then not controlling burn and money, they had to be acquired by startups.co, which is a cool thing. But anyway, Maren, come on down. Ellen is going to be doing the interview. If any of you get a chance to look at Ellen's background, she's pretty much done a little bit of everything at Apple, at Google, all kinds of different places, and she's working on design thinking. Come on down. And advising startups. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
Okay.
Nima. Hi, everybody. Well, Maren, it's great to have you here, and I know here's a room full of people with big dreams and visions for what they want to accomplish, and you've walked the walk as an entrepreneur, and in fact, you're getting ready to walk it again. And it would be great to share some of the things you've learned along that path with this audience. So one of the things when you and I chatted to prepare for this is we talked a lot about blind spots, the things that you don't see when you're starting out. And I wonder if you could share some of your wisdom on blind spots that catch founders and entrepreneurs by surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really easy when you're first starting out to, obviously you don't know a lot, but one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was to know what you don't know. And I tried to take it in as much as I can, but looking back, you really realize the blind spots you have. And as an entrepreneur, there's some things you're good at, and there's some things you're terrible at, and then there's some things you're really, really excellent at, like your zone of genius, I think it's called. But the things that you're okay or good at are sometimes more dangerous than the things you're not good at all. Like, I can't design, I can't code, so I would never try to do either of those. But I can balance my own checkbook, so maybe I kept hold of finance for a few years too long, didn't bring someone full-time into the team. And they were those little blind spots. I noticed the things that I thought I was okay at, that I kept hold of, were by far the most dangerous.
It's such an interesting theme because many of the entrepreneurs or founders that I speak with have this sensibility where they think they should sort of do everything themselves, or worse yet, they should be able to do everything themselves.
Yep.
There's sort of a myth, I think, among startup founders that you have to be kind of good at everything in
Absolutely.
order. Share your thoughts on that and what you'd recommend to people in the room so they don't fall into that trap.
It's actually an American cultural code, and the culture code is the John Wayne culture of, it's why we call bootstrapping bootstrap. It's literally pull yourself up by the bootstraps, that if anyone's ever put on a pair of cowboy boots, that's literally impossible. So we idolize people doing it all themselves, being these he-men or women, but in reality, that's just not the case. When we look at Mark Zuckerberg, it's because he has this amazing team behind him. And I think one of the lies that Silicon Valley tells new founders, maybe even unintentionally, is that you can do it all and you should do it all. And you should work 16 hours and you should, not sleep and not have a good relationship and just grind. And then one day you'll have this unicorn, maybe.
But you say it's a lie that Silicon Valley tells founders. Looking around, the people I hear perpetuating that lie the most tend to be the founders themselves.
Absolutely.
What's that about?
I just think it's, you look at the people that have been successful in the startup world, and you only see one side of the picture. And then you hear aphorisms and truisms about, you should be working super hard, you should be balancing all these different balls, you should be able to juggle this and, manage your team. And there's, there's a lot of idealizing like hackathons or coding through the night. But in reality, that's not sustainable. And so I think it's probably a vicious circle that continues to feed itself.
Have you ever had experiences as a founder when you looked at sort of the bright points of all of the other different entrepreneurs or companies or founders around you and kind of made up this composite being that you compared yourself to?
Oh, absolutely. And that composite being was something that realistically I could never, ever achieve. So I would beat myself up earlier in my career, and also before I went through kind of the traumatizing, hitting the wall with Zirtual, I used to beat myself up a lot. And then when you kind of hit rock bottom, you're like, oh, I was setting my sights on something that wasn't necessarily realistic. And it really brings a lot of things into perspective when you fail, especially when you fail in a kind of very public way.
Interesting. So a key theme that I heard from what you've shared now is really begin with an orientation of sustainability. And on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say to the audience in the room? How important is that, with 1 being low, 10 being high?
To be able to be sustainable yourself personally.
To have an attitude about building something and sustaining it.
I mean, I think it's incredibly important. I think that if you're working on something that you want to be doing, then you want it to be sustainable. And if you're working just for money or just so you can have a big exit, it's the wrong business.
Interesting. So you referenced the startup lifestyle, and there is this image about what a startup is like, and sometimes it does get a little lifestyle-y, the things you're supposed to be doing, the staying up all night, the having the right refreshments in the conference room, and that those are the things that make startup success. But when you and I spoke, we went pretty deep into your thinking on the unit economics and the real business behind the business. What advice or orientation would you like to share with this room about leading with that rather than this is what a startup means?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the idea of, if you watch The Social Network, which probably everybody has, and you think that's a startup, versus in reality, a startup is something that's, the goal is to make money if you're a for-profit business. So understanding your unit economics, no matter what kind of business you're in, understanding how you're going to, at least how you think you're going to get to profitability, I think starting with those things in mind from day one allows you to build something sustainable and to have a lot of more control and power in your own life and in the life of your company, versus trying to aim for vanity metrics, trying to grow without a real understanding of how you're going to turn this into a real business. I feel like the idea of making money is sometimes taboo when you talk about tech startups because it's just generating more users or getting more traffic, or there's all these things that are bright and shiny that people get distracted by, both entrepreneurs and VCs. But at the end of the day, people are here to make a business that produces something that helps people and makes, money for the investors and the team.
And how can founders be mindful of that from the very start of their journey?
I mean, you can just choose to put that as part of your priority instead of doing a X plus Y equals profit. You can really think through with your team, with your co-founders, and be very honest with your investors, or when you're talking to investors. I do think that the landscape is changing and that people aren't putting money into companies as much anymore that have no idea how they're going to become profitable or make revenue. So I think it's kind of a forcing function, which is good.
Which is good, absolutely. I want to talk about the F word, failure.
Gotcha.
Failure. It's a big word, and we talk a lot in Silicon Valley about my startup failed, or I had an idea but it wasn't funded so it failed. Certainly that's something that we've all seen, companies that don't make it. But I'm really interested in the longer arc of entrepreneurship and really the things that we learn as we move through different entrepreneurial journeys. So I'd love you to reflect on the F word and what you've learned from it and how it positions you for your next chapter as a rising entrepreneur.
Probably the biggest thing I learned from my most recent failure was that both that take advantage of and enjoy the good times, the small wins, the things that happen with your team or even in your relationship. And then the other aspect would just be to be able to fail forward, to be able to take learnings and not blame other people. There's something called the locus of control, and you either have an internal or an external locus of control. And if you have an external one, it's everyone else's fault. And if you have an internal one, you're like, okay, what did I do to precipitate this? If you can, no matter what the situation is, if you can think through how you added to it, you can learn and grow, and you'll become much wiser as a person and much better of an entrepreneur.
Right. And how do you think entrepreneurs can do a better job sharing the wins, but also the failures with each other so that they get more learning and perspective on that?
I think I think everybody needs to be more vulnerable. I've been writing a lot about vulnerability and trying to open up about personal failings and business failings because I think it's very easy for us to look at Elon Musk and there'll be a short segment in the Fast Company article that said he was sleeping on a friend's sofa, but then you see him now and you're like, he's a billionaire, awesome, versus actually being in the moment when you're sleeping on the friend's sofa and being like, I'm going to be honest about this. I'm not going to fake it until I make it. I'm going to be honest with those around me. And I think if the business community in general can be more vulnerable, it will help bring better ideas and better people bubble up to the top.
What do you think would have changed as you look back if you'd had that insight then?
I would have asked for help more. I wouldn't have thought I had to do it all myself. I wouldn't have beat myself up as much. I think having that insight really changes the game for an entrepreneur.
Based on your experience with other founders, do you feel that entrepreneurs beat themselves up more than they need to?
For sure. I think people in general beat themselves up more than they need to. But I think that, like we were saying, we hold ourselves to this standard that's not necessarily realistic. And there's also a great quote, I don't know who it's from, but it's comparison is the thief of joy versus being grounded in the present moment in your company, understanding what your business needs now versus how can I go and be XYZ, or how can I'm 30 and at this age, such and such was a billionaire already. Instead of comparing ourselves to other people, focus on what we're doing now and, where we want it to go, and then ask for help, be vulnerable.
It's a really important piece of information. So thinking back to that earlier time and the learning that you have, if you were able to go back and really talk to that former self, what would you say about not having anything to prove, being open to collaboration with other people, maybe believing in yourself more? What would you say to that person a few years back as you were starting out that would point them in a direction you think is more sustainable?
I would tell myself 5 years ago to go to personal therapy immediately, because personal therapy actually really helps you get through all those issues. And most people don't put them into it until they've had a blow up of some sort in their life. I think working through your issues as a person is incredibly vital to your business's success, because if we aren't honest with ourselves, we're not able to bring up our best to the business world, especially if you're the CEO or one of the co-founders. And honestly, if you go back and you talk to yourself 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said that much outside of put yourself into therapy, because there's something really beautiful about not knowing how hard it's going to be and not knowing what a struggle it's going to be, because you're like blindly optimistic. Now you need to balance that with having either a board or advisors that can balance your blind optimism with reality. But there is something really powerful about a first-time entrepreneur, and that just like, I'm going to take on the world mentality. So I wouldn't want to damper that too much.
Interesting. When you think about serendipity and sort of chance occurrences and things, kind of the magic that really helps move a business forward, did you have anything along your journey with Zirtual that you looked at especially serendipitous that sort of paid dividends in ways that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I reached out to a ton of people, tried to do a lot of coffees. I read a ton of books so I could learn from the best. And then I forced myself to be out there as much as I could, talking to random people, striking up a conversation at the coffee shop or while you're in line, and just trying to get as many points of, human touch as possible, because that serendipity multiplied in itself. And that was actually how I met Tony Shea, who was our lead investor, who's actually still a really dear friend and like a personal advisor. And I met him through a bunch of random touch points. We hit it off. He was the one that put the first check into our first round, and it kind of went from there. And you can't track that back like an A to B, but you can track it back through 100 different little ping pong points.
Really
so putting yourself out there for serendipity, for luck to happen, is a big one.
What I like about that answer, Maren, is, there's so much that we can prove with data, and there's so many things we can show with the trend. But I think there is also another side to entrepreneurship, which is really about sort of approaching it with the attitude of success and discovery in mind that can predispose us toward success, even if it's in a longer-term arc of success than, one business at a time. Would you agree with that based on your experience?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we have 5 more minutes, so that lets us explore it a little bit more. But if you look at this audience here, I'm sure many of us in this room are thinking about starting entrepreneurial journeys of our own. What advice would you have for people, even today, for beginning that process of moving towards serendipity, increasing the probability of fortuitous connections that move things forward?
I'd say I would actually take it back one more step. As I'd say first, really ask yourself honestly why you want to start a business, why you're doing what you're doing. Is it because you crave the community that building a business creates, which is a super strong community and a culture, and it can be like, like a wonderful drug? Is it because you crave a lot of money? Is it because you want power or success? Like, lie to everyone else if you want, but be very honest with yourself about that. And from that point, then you can take it to the next step. And as long as you're okay with where you are and that you're doing things for the right reason, after that, I think it's just a matter of doing things like you're doing right now, going to conferences, striking up new conversations. The fact that we can use tools like Medium or blogs or Snapchat to document our journey, I think asking people to join your journey when you're starting a company is really, really cool. everybody gets to see people that succeed in magazines, but very few people get to watch the journey. And there'll be those of you in the audience that will be massive successes. So start documenting your journey now and open up like minds to join your journey and follow you. And that will create amazing serendipity and amazing, it'll pay dividends. My personal blog that I've kept for 8 years has probably been the biggest source of connection that I've had. And, you know, it's a super simple thing to do. Anyone can do it.
That's great. So how do you take these lessons to what inspires you in your next vision? How will they serve you, and how will your learning be expressed through the next founding that you're taking on?
I think I, take away a few lessons, like hedge your bets. You don't have to put all of your eggs in one basket, even though that's kind of the popular wisdom. When you can, pay yourself what you're worth. You don't need to scrape by on pennies because you're showing how dedicated you are to the business. I also think that when you fail and it doesn't kill you, it shows you that, hey, you can actually take bigger chances. Like, it really won't destroy me to fail. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you. Maren, your journey is awesome. Okay. Next speaker, Nick Desai, is the CEO of Heal. And when we first talked to him, he really talked about this idea of a lot of fundraising now, or a lot of companies are creating hype and a bunch of bullshit and fluff. And it's actually really just around results and creating value. And so I think he's done 2 or 3 other startups successfully, but now with Heal, it's basically doctors on demand. And I just really liked that he's kind of a straight shooter. So Nick, come on down. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. All right.
Do you have a clicker?
I don't have slides, so I'm okay. Hey, everybody. How are you? I know I'm the last speaker before the VC panel, and I know that's kind of the highlight of shows like this. So I'll try to keep it as interesting and short and informative as possible. So you guys have been sitting here for a while, so let's start with a show of hands. How many of you are currently trying to get your startup funded? A lot of people. Good. That's good news. And how many of you have heard the term smart money versus dumb money? Okay, good. You've heard this term. And how many of you have ever read a book about or article or TechCrunch or Pando Daily about some company that gets funded, and you read about the founder and you're like, but previously he was this at PayPal, and previously he was that guy, and his lawyer knew this guy, and he was the partner of the VC firm, and he were golfing buddies, and you're like, and you sit there and you read these things and you think to yourself, but I don't know these guys, and I didn't work at PayPal, so how is this going to work for me? Has that happened to you? Okay, so that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. I'm based in Los Angeles, right, which is a 45-minute Southwest Airlines flight away from here. But if you heard the Silicon Valley VCs that are on Menlo Park and Sand Hill Road talk about it, you would think it was Mars, because it's like, oh my God, you're in LA, we can't fund you because you're in LA, because that's not Silicon Valley, right? And I mention that because one of the things that is important to know in the post-bubble economy or the pre-bubble economy or during a bubble is a few different things, and those are the things I'm here to talk about. The first is, how do we get these bubbles, right? How do bubbles come and how do bubbles go? I'm no expert on economics, but one of the things that is fairly obvious is between the middle of 2009, about June 2009, and the middle of last year, the stock market had one of its greatest run-ups in the Dow Jones, and the stock market had one of its greatest run-ups in the history of stock markets in the U.S. And by no coincidence, venture capital money was flowing. Why? Because the public markets are where venture capital firms find liquidity. That's where they sell companies, that's where they take them public, and the companies who buy companies, the Googles and the Facebooks who acquire a lot of these companies, their stock is going up too. So everything is cheaper in terms of the relative value of their stock being higher, so everything goes up more, and so more money flows into startups. But that actually creates a sense of inflation within the startup community. You've all read about housing prices here in the Bay Area, and it's $2,500 a month for someone to live in a box, and Google engineers are living in their own vans, and all these kinds of things that are going on. There's a sense of wage inflation, entitlement inflation, perks inflation that goes along. So companies are raising more money, but everything is more expensive to do too, right? There was one prominent Bay Area company that announced last week they were cutting employee perks, not salaries, not benefits, not number of employees, but perks by $38 million a year, right? How many perks do you have to be giving out to be able to cut $38 million in perks, right? It's a pretty big amount of perks that you must be giving out, right? We're in LA, and about the perk we have is that there's a free water dispenser in the co-working space where we work, okay? And that's after $13 million of funding that we've raised, right? So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, is that the public markets and the rise of those markets, the bullish nature of public markets, do affect the ways the venture capital market sector and how they look at companies. But the other thing to keep in mind is that venture capital firms and venture capitalists, whether they're here in Silicon Valley or in Los Angeles or in Boston, are typically, and again, there are great VCs out there, and I don't want to piss anyone off because I still have to raise money. So I say this with a grain of salt, but VCs are rarely investors in revolutions. They're mostly investors in evolutions. They recognize patterns. They look for spaces that are hot. They look for teams that they've worked with. They look for economics they can understand, right? When the first VCs invested in Uber, it was a black car service. It was not, I get in the back of a Prius of a random person, right? It was a black car service. And then Uber did UberX, copying Lyft or Sidecar, however you want to tell that particular story. The point is, Uber became Uber. Travis executed like crazy. They grew the company. And most of the money they've raised since then is investing in the success of what is a pretty well-defined success story, a category-changing company. The revolution Uber made, they made, and VCs invested post-revolution rather than pre-revolution. So, and one of the title of my talk, I think, is, this thing keeps falling off. The title of my talk is, raising money in a post-bubble economy, but keeping in mind how you want to change the world, right? And oftentimes, the investors and the entrepreneurs who want to do the biggest or most dramatic changes sometimes have the hardest time raising money, because the incremental change. I have an ad tech to play that does this 5% better than this and cuts cost 8% over this, and I'm previously from an ad tech company and I have 10 years of ad tech experience and blah, blah, blah. That's an easier story to understand than I'm doing something you've never heard of before in a space that doesn't exist yet, right? Leah from TaskRabbit was up here, and they created the gig economy before there was a gig economy, before we knew to call it a gig economy. TaskRabbit was a precursor to Postmates and Uber and all of these different services, right? And they've been through as she said, from the good times and the bad times in fundraising. But here's the good news, and this is what I think is important to remember, is that there are more ways to raise money now than ever before, right? 10, 12 years ago, I don't know how many seasons the show's on, there wasn't Shark Tank. People go on to Shark Tank and raise money, right? There wasn't crowdfunding. Now there's Kickstarter and Indiegogo and all these different crowdfunding campaigns. And most recently, starting last year, who here is familiar with Title IV, the SEC Title IV? Okay, very few of you. You should look this up. It's a way for small companies to raise money in the public markets. It's called crowd investing, right? There's a company called Elio Motors that just worked with a platform called Start Engine and raised $17 million in a public offering as a pre-revenue, pre-launch, pre-everything company on a concept, right? That didn't exist a few years ago, right? All of these different mechanisms are out there, and I mention that because the venture capital community might look at something a certain way, but it doesn't mean private investors do. My bio, and I think in the program here says I've raised $47 million in venture capital or investor capital. That's true, except it's now $53 million because we closed $6 million last week for Heal. That's unannounced yet. And the lead investor in that is not a venture capitalist, but actually a very, very renowned, very well-known billionaire, right? And I can't say who because the investment isn't announced yet and we want to make kind of a big deal of it. But the point is, I was talking to a VC after that investment closed. I was telling him who it was, and he said, That kind of dumb money, when it's here, and the markets are good, and that kind of dumb money is available, but you have to keep in mind that kind of money can dry up. And I said right back, well, so does VC money, right? It ebbs and flows with the market. So the most important, if you remember nothing else from what I'm saying up here today, remember this. There is not one way to raise money. There are many ways to raise money. The $13 million we've raised for HEAL has been almost 100% from private angels, super angels, and very wealthy people who believe in the concept of what we're doing. Whereas when I raised money for FitOrbit, 12 million of that came from traditional venture capital and corporate venture capital firms. And when I raised money for Juice Wireless, it was almost all corporate venture capital firms. And for Ziki, it was all venture capital firms, and angel investors. So the time and the market and your product and your service and the stage of your company and your level of experience dictates which way you might work for you. But if you're not trying all of them, you're not really trying any of them successfully. Because I'm here to tell you that there's no really such thing as the difference between smart money and dumb money, right? I've been into these VC conferences and startup conferences before as an audience member, and people are talking about, well, when you raise VC funding and you have 3 competing term sheets, and how do you negotiate between these term sheets while keeping all the VCs hot to get the best deal for yourself? And I always used to sit there and say to myself, what if you have no term sheets? What if you got a guy holding your deck in your hand, okay, deck, not the other one, holding your deck in your hand and trying to pitch this idea, and you have 2 guys working for free for you, okay, out of your mom's garage, and you have no money and no product and no bupkis, and you're trying to get money, okay? And you don't have enough money to the Southwest flight to fly in to meet the VCs in the first place, right? What if you're that guy? Well, that's where all of us start at some point, I'd like to think. And so you have to try all of the different mechanisms that are out there, whether it's Kickstarter or crowdfunding or crowd investing or Shark Tank or VCs or angels or super angels or corporate. If you're not pitching, you're not trying. Between 1998 and this year, I have raised actually closed investment capital in all but 5 of the years in those 18 years. And that's not to say I'm great. That's to say that I've been a CEO of a startup or different startups. And the point is, you always should be raising money, right? That is your number one job, is to keep the company funded, right? Now, the other thing, which I think Leah said very well, is that you have to fundamentally build something that actually has value. There has to be product market fit. It has to be a great product. You have to have a great team. It doesn't mean a team with track records that knows the right people. It means a team that's relevant to what the heck you're actually doing, right? We're a house call doctor service, so my co-founder is a triple board certified doctor. So she knows medicine. She also happens to be my wife, and I know how to do tech startups, right? So the point is that you have to build something that fundamentally has value. And if you do, there's no such thing as a good market or a bad market. When VCs talk about the bubbles burst and this and that, and valuations are coming down, those things actually don't affect you if you're just starting your startup that much. Because guess what? These bubbles and the down markets and up markets last a couple of years, and then things get better. And they last a few years and things get worse. That's a cyclical nature of business. It's a cyclical nature of human beings in the public and private markets that we've seen over the last 100 years. And the point of that is to say that there's no such thing that affects you you don't care if you raise your seed round or your A round at a 5 million or a 7 million pre-money valuation. And if you do, you're stupid. You shouldn't care. Okay, what you should care about is, are you getting enough capital to deliver real milestones, to build a product or service that has real value, that has a real business model, that has real unit economics, that actually work for you and for your investors, so you can keep hitting milestones, so you can keep raising money, right? It's easy to sit here and think about, well, organic growth is the path. The lady from Citrus Lane was talking about that. But organic growth only happens if people actually like your product. Because no one's going to tell their friend, I bought this thing and it's crappy, but it would help out the company if you use it, right? They're going to tell their friends if they organically love their product. 38% of all of our customers come from word of mouth, because people try HEAL and their doctor comes to their house and they're so blown away, they tell their friends, my doctor comes to my house now, right? So if you build something that has fundamental, real, transformative value that is different, that consumers want, that isn't a fad, or businesses want, or whoever your audience is, that has a real economic and business model, you'll raise money in the good times and in bad. One of the most interesting things I find is a misperception is when people hear that the VC markets are tougher, or that it's harder to raise money, or valuations are coming down, they somehow think that all of the VC funds have no money left. That's not the case at all. If you read the research on the VC funds just here in the Bay Area, and it's easy to do, you'll find out when they raised their last fund. This company raised $1 billion fund, and that fund raised a $400 million fund. That money's sitting there, and they're not paid to sit on money, they're paid to invest it, right? And so whether or not and you're lucky if you're in the early starting position. You know where it's tough to be right now? It's tough to be trying to raise your B round. And you raised your A round at $100 million valuation in the bubble, and you got 25 on 100, but now you need another 25 million, and you spent, and you got the baristas and the perks and the gourmet chefs to come and all the cool things that companies like to do, especially up here in the Bay Area, and you did all that stuff, and now you have to raise your B round, and even though you've had some performance, and even though you've grown a little bit, you haven't blown the doors off the place, and you're going to fight, and now you're having to consider a down round, and your existing investors are upset, and the employee options are underwater, so employees start to leave for the next hot startup. That's the tougher place to be. If you're just starting out now, the fact that there's a bubble or not a bubble, you should not even think about that. Great companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, the Apples, these companies, Intels, are immune from economic cycles because they build something that is fundamentally of value, and they continue to innovate and they continue to deliver on that, right? So I'll close and then I'll open up to questions if there's time by saying three things. Number one, don't be affected by whether there's a bubble or not. Number two, try every single channel to raise money that is out there. And talk to everyone. And number three, try every channel. Number two is try every channel of fundraising. And number three, build a product, service, or business that is fundamentally has real, lasting value and economics you can believe in. One of the great things about having my wife as a business partner is she asks me once a month, she turns to me. We have 2 little boys at home and a mortgage, and so, she does the worrying for both of us, and she turns to me and she asks me, she says, honey, is this really a business? Is this really a company? Or are we just selling, right? And I tell her, because she's my wife and because we have kids, I would tell you if I stop believing in it, right? If you don't, oftentimes we get so eager in the pitch and the story and how to tell it and how to convince other people, we forget that we have to convince ourselves, right? If you're not sold on your story, don't go sell it, because getting money is the easy part. Having to call investors and saying, look, I spent your $4 million and nothing came of it, that's a lot tougher phone call to make than, hi, will you give me the money in the first place? So those are the three things I have to say. We're Heal, and I will give you this shameless plug because I said build something of fundamental value. Check out getheal.com. Download the app. It's a doctor to your door in 2 hours or less. We accept all PPO insurance. Otherwise, it's $99, 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and I'd love for all of you to check it out. Thank you. I think I have about 2, 3, 4 minutes for questions if there are any. Up here.
This is probably a more general question. So an idea could be great. How do you protect your business from stealing the idea or replicating it? Do you file patents, or what do you do? So
the question was, how do you protect the intellectual property or your idea in your business? And my answer to that is always you don't. You only protect it by doing, right? I get asked this all the time because I speak at universities a lot to students who want to be entrepreneurs, and they say, well, is this a good idea or is that how do I know if I have a good idea? And I always say this, there's no such thing as a good idea and there's no such thing as a bad idea. There's people who get up in the morning and change the world, and there's people who don't, right? The only way to protect your idea is to do it. Think about this. Uber has changed the world of transportation without any meaningful patent or intellectual property. They've done it by just doing it faster than anyone else could have imagined that they would do it, right? So I wouldn't worry about that nearly as much as I would worry about get my business out there, get my product out there, make my customers love it, and the rest of it will follow. Up here. I'm at DJ No Funk on Twitter, but I do have to leave. And I have 1 minute, so any last questions?
Hi, Nick, you're really awesome. So
thank you.
On the second question about omnichannel, raising money and all, you went through the list really fast. Could you slow down a little bit and throw a few names out there?
Of the different ways to raise money?
Yeah.
So one is obviously the traditional venture capital channel, and you can easily start, if you don't know any VC names in the world, just Google top 25 venture capitalists, top 100 venture capitalists, and then do your homework. Go to their website, see what they invest in, find the right partner. Most of them list their emails on their website. Send them an email, right? Number 2 is the crowdfunding sources, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and the campaigns like that. Number 3 is crowd investing. There's a company called Start Engine. I'm not endorsing any one company, but Howard Marks runs that, and I know that company, and it's a very good company in the space. And they've done great in the crowd investing space. Number 4 is angels and super angels. Who's an angel? Anyone with $10 in their pocket that they'll give to you, okay? The people in this room, hey, I got an idea. Will you give me $5? And then the last one, which I sort of forgot to mention, is your customers. The best way to raise money is to not have to by selling something to customers and being profitable as a business. And then, of course, Shark Tank. And just Google the Shark Tank TV show, and you should be able to apply. And I'm amazed at the diversity and variety of entrepreneurs they bring on there and how bad some of the ideas are. And that's a good thing, because that means there's a lot of room for ideas. And that's not to say your idea is good or bad. It just means that they'll take a lot of different people out there to pitch. I think I'm out of time, so thank you.
What did I tell you? No bullshit, straight to the point. I truly appreciate all the advice. I had an interesting conversation with Nick before. All right, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? Our finalists are going to pitch our investor panel. The investor panel includes Intel Capital, Correlation Ventures, Luma Capital, who else? I don't know. But amazing, amazing VCs with tons of background. And if you check out their portfolios, really, really cool. Bill Reichert, again, is going to lead the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen from the panel, please come on down. Investors, that's you. Now, come on. Come on down. So the format is going to be a little bit longer pitch, 3 to 5 minutes, and then they're going to get grilled by the investors. This time, you don't get to vote. They get to pick the winner. Come on. Trevor, come on. Trevor's from Correlation Ventures. Awesome fund. They do some really cool stuff.
Done. Okay.
Preetha's from Intel Capital. Welcome. You've already met Bill Reichert. Yeah. Jenny and Carey. Okay. One more.
Jacques. Where's Jacques?
Jacques, where are you?
Jacques, where's Jacques? Ah, those Frenchmen. That was terrible. Okay, well, we're waiting for Jacques. So I met most of you earlier today. My name is Bill Reichert, Managing Director at Garage Technology Ventures, seed and early stage venture capital firm. Most of my career was as an entrepreneur, started out on the pitching company side of the equation, and then, like so many, crossed over into venture capital. But I'd like to have the panel here each introduce themselves briefly. Let's start with Trevor.
Hi, my name is Trevor Kinsley. I'm co-founder of Correlation Ventures, which is the most active co-investor in U.S. venture. We can consider any investment that has at least one outside VC other than us making their first bet in the company. Our investments are diverse by sector, stage, U.S. geography. In a typical fund, we'll make 121, or last fund we made 121 investments. So again, we offer a very unique value proposition. Once you find your lead, we will give you a decision in 2 weeks or less on up to $3 million with about 10 minutes of work. We will request 5 items that are a subset of what you've requested from these individuals. With that, we'll populate our 30-factor algorithm. So after 10 years in the lead investor seat, my co-founder David Coates and I, and Anu Pathria and Grace Chu-Miller, founded Correlation to help solve the problem of finishing rounds quickly after you've gone through the months of due diligence and negotiation.
Hi, I'm Preetha. I'm an investment director with Intel Capital, focused on our diversity fund. Last year, Intel created a $125 million fund focused on women and underrepresented minorities. So the criteria for the diversity fund is a company that is strategic to Intel. And on top of it, if you know a company with a woman co-founder or, an underrepresented minority or 3 or more on the CEO staff, If it fits in the diversity criteria, please let us know.
Nope.
No, it's on.
Oh, it's on. Sorry. I am the one with the handheld microphone, which I cannot, I'm not sure why, but I am Jenny Lefcourt. I am a partner at Freestyle Capital. We're a $60 million seed stage fund based in San Francisco. Basically, we invest in early stage technology companies. I would say we used to be about half B2B, half B2C, but we're probably about 70% B2B these days. And we're typically writing a check for about $800,000, and our entrepreneurs are typically raising between $2 and $3 million. So, you know, we have Trevor with some of ours and other great investors. And prior to joining Freestyle, I was a serial entrepreneur, started a couple companies, and my two partners who founded Freestyle are also serial entrepreneurs. So we feel that our point of difference is that we've been you a few times, and so the wisdom and the value that we can add to get you from seed to Series A is pretty unique.
My name is Carey. I'm with Luma Capital Partners. If you haven't heard of us, we're a brand new fund. We just launched earlier this year. Probably familiar with some of our Lumascapes. We're a fund that's exclusively focused on marketing technology. We believe 100% that Sand Hill Road is really well architected around the CIO and the consumer, and everyone has left the CMO alone. And so we have focused exclusively around selling scalable software platforms to the chief marketing officer. And over the last 5 years, that's been a really fantastic area of growth for lots of companies like Sprinkler, Bright Edge, and others. Some of them have even gone public based on that, such as Marketo and HubSpot and others. So really thrilled and excited to be here. Thank you for having us. I think I'm a returnee from last year, so it's wonderful to be here.
And Jacques.
Hi, I'm Jacques Benkowski. I'm a partner with US Venture Partners. USVP, as it is usually called, has been around for more than 35 years. We've invested in 500 companies, 89 IPOs, and 140-something positive M&A. So there's a tremendous depth of knowledge and historical perspective on company building. We invest in IT mostly. We do some medical devices and some healthcare IT. And in IT, we invest in e-commerce, SaaS, cloud, and security. We like to invest in things that can become very, very big. We were investors in Sun Microsystems. We were investors in SanDisk and many others that you have known. And so we're looking for a typical Series A, somebody that would have perhaps gotten money from some of my colleagues earlier, and then we'll do the heavy lifting of going from A to hopefully IPO.
Great. Well, thank all of you guys for being here, and thank you guys, of course. So this is actually one of my favorite events of the year because it's kind of a different event than normal, a different investor panel. As most of you know, you selected the top 3 entrepreneur pitches from earlier today, and now we're going to have each of the entrepreneurs of the 3 winners come out and pitch to this panel. And after we do a little Q&A with them, figure out what we think they're doing, cross-examine them, we're going to have a discussion in front of you as if we were holding a partners meeting, as if we were partners in the same fund trying to figure out which one of these great startup companies do we want to invest in. And then we're going to award the top prize to the company we think is most deserving. So that's what we're about to do. And so let's have our first entrepreneur coming out.
Is that yours or is that mine?
Oh, I drunk from it. So.
Then it's definitely yours.
All right.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Andreas from iGrow. We are building the world's largest organic farm funded by you. My mother's family were farmers, but they have problem to get proper income because they don't have enough capital and land. And they are not alone. In Indonesia, there are millions underemployed farmers, while in other side, there are millions acres underutilized land and millions people ready to participate in farming. That's why we create iGrow. We connect between the farmers, landowners, and investors together to create farming. And we sell directly the crops to the customers. We are raising capital from you through our website and give you farm field-like experience so that you can know how your plantation grow. And after the harvest time, we share the profit among investors and farmers. Just from peanut alone, we already harvested 1,600 tons of produce that bring 24% annualized return to the investors, and 99% of them reinvested in us. We are in operational for 19 months. We are already profitable by making $1.2 million GMV, and we take 20% of that for our profit. Currently, we are working with 2,200 farmers in 3,000 acres underutilized land. We already made our farmers' life better, and we changed the way how we utilize our idle land. We are in Indonesia with 27 million acres underutilized land, and we already had 24,000 acres in our pipeline. We also ready to scale to another country. Our team consists of serial tech entrepreneur, 10 years experience in agriculture, and the expert in land partnership. Together with landowners, farmers, and you, let us build the world's largest organic farm by making our world a better place. Thank you.
So we have a few minutes now for questions. Any questions for Andreas?
I have a question. So I missed the part of the slide. After the produce exists, how do you then get it into the market? Do you sell it to retailers, to consumers?
First of all, we never start any plantation before we secure the demand. So we made the partnership, we signed the MOU, we signed the deal with the customers. The customers can be highly distributed supermarket, kind of like Target or Walmart here. We have Carrefour, Giant in Indonesia. Can be also big producers. We have partnership with the big peanut producers in Indonesia, and also with the company who produce the food processing product. Can be anything, but in the first, we secure the demand. So we already closed the supply chain of agriculture since the beginning.
Following up on that, do you also secure the price, or is it spot market price?
Oh yeah, our price based on the market price on our harvest day.
At delivery,
Yeah.
at the back, okay. All right. Get that? So, Jacques.
So are you using your own capital to help the farmers, or are you raising money that you then invest in them?
We are raising capital from our website. So you enter our website and you choose the seed that you want to invest. You can choose banana, peanut, longan, durian, avocado as you like. And
So
then
do you pick the crop, or do you pick the farmer?
pick the crops.
You pick the crop.
Yep.
Okay.
Pick
And
the
these are
crops.
individuals doing the investing?
Yep, individual. All of our investors come from individual investors. So the one who have from $100 can invest in our platform.
So do you accept, I think of it sort of as Kiva for farming. Is that?
Can simplify it like that.
Okay, except, I mean, so I think the idea is that small individual investors put small amounts of money down against crops. You aggregate around a particular crop. And then what I saw on the slide is you said you returned 124% of the capital and 99% of it reinvested, right? So like Kiva, you can let it ride, right? Is that the idea?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, does that make
sense?
Okay. Other questions, Trevor?
So how do you deal with currency risk? Is this an attractive investment for Indonesian personal investors only? Or what about a US or European investor that might invest in crops in Indonesia?
First, we only open our platform to Indonesian investors, but just last month, we opened our platform to global. So everyone with PayPal account can invest in our platform. And we also adjust the currency every time, and we have a formula to make our risk management become more secure when the harvest time.
So ergo, if the currency shifts on me as an investor, say in the United States, that's on me? Or do you offer any hedges or kind of options, if you will, that would help protect that risk, as maybe add-on product?
We did do both of them. First in the currency management, and also we have risk management in ourselves. We have insurance to protect our crops, catastrophic insurance, and we have endowment fund to protect your investment. So the worst case, you will get your investment back 100%. That's for the risk management for the crops.
So wait, are you guaranteeing investors that they won't lose a dime? Is that what you just said?
Yep.
You are?
Yep.
How are you doing that?
We take certain amount of money from our investor capital, and we take that to become our endowment fund. And we also insurance in our third-party partner. We have insurance company.
A third party.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
That's a question. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
How do these customers who are investing find out about you? Are you paying to acquire them, or are they just naturally coming to you?
Oh yeah, we just start paid acquisition strategy just 2 months ago. Before that, all of our customers, all of our investors come from organic growth. We did blog posting in our blog. We have certain blog, and all of our customers come from our blog, interested with our concept, with our idea. They test in short-term plantation like peanut. We only wait until 6 months, and we can get the return. It proof, and then they keep investing. They keep investing in long-term investment and a big number of investment. We have investors that already invest their money for $30,000 only for one person.
So it's a question and a critique at the same time. I think what you're doing is wonderful, but we like to have one domain of innovation, one domain of risk per company, not 2 or 3. And so it seems to me like there's a tremendous innovation, tremendous potential to create a substantial company just on the downstream side, on helping invest into the growers and helping with the market dynamics that you explain, all that. That is wonderful. You're attaching to that what looks like a lending club to me, and that comes with tremendous regulation risk, comes up with a whole bunch of issues that have to do with international commerce, whereas if you had just this first part of it working and you were able to show return using your own capital or initial, there'll be plenty of institutional money and you don't have to worry about small lenders. Mm-hmm. So why do both?
Yeah, for the regulation, right?
Just you have enough to worry about just getting the Indonesia on the ground, making the growers grow and close the loop on the market as you're doing. Mm-hmm. That is a company by itself. It's a very valuable company. Yep. Why bother with the lending club piece?
Yeah, actually, we want to circulate the money to the farmers and the owners. So we also want to spread our value and vision to everybody in the world. So it's not just want to take big money from the lending platform like bank or investment company. It's not simple as that, because we want to our biggest vision. We want to make all of people in the world concerned about the food security. In the future, we will face a big problem about food security. We must increase our food security, and it's not about the problem with the money, but also the concern of the people.
So, so what I hear is a big piece of what you want to do has a social impact, philanthropy, educational aspect of it, as opposed to a pure play business rate of return aspect. That's what is that accurate?
Right.
Okay.
And we can also do both of that. We can also do individual investors, and if there is individual institution, a big institution want to invest their money in Igro platform, we can also accept that. We can do both of them. But our first priority, targeting individual investors around the world.
Where are your customers located? There's an awareness towards, local farming and buying it from local suppliers. How do you match your customers and suppliers?
The customers that you mean is the customer who buy our crops, right?
Right.
Yeah. Currently, our customer only come from the big distributors, big supermarket. But in the future, we can also make our product to become more valuable, so we can sell it directly to the customers. But we still need a process to do that. In the beginning, we less than 2 years then did I grow. So we need small goals. So that's why we cooperate with the big distributors, with the big supermarket, to make our operational more efficient and to secure the demand, to close the loop of agriculture supply chain.
So what's your expansion strategy? Do you want to expand the investors into Indonesia? Do you want to expand the farmers outside of Indonesia? What's your expansion thinking?
Yeah, both of them. Our first expansion will be Turkey. In the end of this month, we will open 600 acres of olive oil plantation in Turkey. We already have partner there, and we are plant that kind of plantation in the end of this month. And parallel with that, we also expand our potential investors. So everybody can become our investors.
So, can you talk a little bit about how the I guess the agricultural market in Indonesia is it fragmented? Is it lots of large corporate-owned farms? Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? And from a competitive perspective, how would, if it is less fragmented, perhaps like the U.S. where it's more corporate-owned, how would they react to something like this?
Yeah, actually in Indonesia alone, we have problem to produce crops that can fulfill all of our population need. We still import a lot of crops from the foreign country. For example, durian and longan that become two of the biggest fruit import produced from the foreign country to Indonesia. So that's why we want to produce durian and longan in our country, because there is not enough produce in durian and longan. So it's still high demand in terms of produce only in Indonesia. And we can see a lot of countries also have that problem.
So last question, Trevor.
You went through the team slide very quickly. Could you go back to that, please, and just explain your own background and relevancy to this business model?
Yeah, the team? Yeah, the team consists of me, product development expert. I did my first company when I was in college, software house that already built more than 150 tech product portfolio. And our co-founder, Iqbal, have huge experience in financial industry. He was ex-director of one of the biggest finance company in Jakarta named Bintang Insurance. So he knows a lot of risk management and financial planning. And also after he retired from that company, he became entrepreneur in agriculture. And the third one, Jim, is the expert in land partnership. He did property company before joining iGrow.
Okay, great. So I'm afraid we're out of time, but Andreas, thank you very much. Yeah, great job. All right. Okay, next up, drum roll. People Loop, congratulations. Come on down.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks in advance to the panel for the opportunity to present in front of you and to Nima and the Startup Conference. It's great to be here and excited to present. So People Loop is disrupting the $400 billion global staffing industry through our unique cloud-connected recruiter network. Now, we launched about 14 months ago, and we've had great traction. We're working with companies like Tesla, ESPN, Gatorade, Disney, and Capital One. And we've placed on assignment about $6 million in contract and temporary labor payroll through our recruiter network, which is much different than the traditional branch office staffing model that William Kelly innovated with Kelly Services in the 1950s and hasn't changed much since. So we're projecting $1 billion in projected payroll generated between now and 2019. Our team really knows this space well. I have 18 years experience innovating in contingent labor. I've owned staffing companies. I've started managed services programs, vendor management companies, applicant tracking systems. And some of the businesses I've started have grown to 0 to 15 million in 3 years, 0 to 23 million in 2.5 years, 0 to 3.2 billion in 4 years. The rest of our team has experience running PEOs, doing major marketing in global markets for companies like Match.com, Dan Austin was the head of search for Home Depot, and Reena Gupta has one of the most highly regarded applicant tracking systems available on the market today. This is a big market. I mentioned 400 billion. Now, in the Valley, there's always a lot of exciting talk about the gig economy. But in the upper right, you'll see that the gig economy is going from 1 billion to 20 billion by 2021. And that's just 20 billion of the $400 billion market. I'm talking about the other 380 billion is what we're dealing with here, where the top 100 companies control 50% of the market. Adecco, Randstad, Kelly, those are the big players globally that control that market. We're aggregating the 260,000 independent recruiters that control the other half. That's our goal. And there's 100,000 customers, as you'll see in the bottom right, that don't have technology to manage their staffing vendors at all. Mainly mid-sized companies, but that's a big number in the US. The problems for companies, it's hard to find temp talent through a very crowded marketplace. It's expensive and risky to use these staffing companies because they have a brick and mortar model and they have embedded costs that they can't get rid of. Furthermore, a lot of small to mid-sized staffing companies aren't very compliant. They're not good about processing payroll and sometimes remitting taxes. That's risky. And it's complicated and time-consuming to work with and aggregate all these independent recruiters because the HR personnel need to have time to do their day-to-day job, not manage 12 independent vendors. Recruiters, and I apologize for the way that looks up there. Recruiters, small and mid-sized staffing companies and independent recruiters also have problems. They have a hard time winning new business because of marketplace clutter. Many of these recruiters can't get into Gatorade or Tesla or Disney because they're not big enough and they can't capture their attention. Most do not have the resources to compliantly employ the contractors that they place on assignment. Some place contractors on assignment on 1099, putting the client and them at risk. And furthermore, they just can't compete with large staffing companies on price. We handle the payroll for them and manage the employer of record so they can focus on recruiting. So our solution reduces workforce costs for clients. It raises workforce compliance. It gives clients access to previously unavailable talent. They just don't have time to work with all these micro niche recruiting specialists who are way better at what they do than branch office on a draw personnel that you'll find at the big staffing companies. And we can track and rate workers with the social effect better than any other solution that's out there. Recruiters get access to previously unavailable clients. They also have the ability to make money part-time or full-time. As we grow PeopleLoop, it won't just be recruiters. It'll be like Uber taxi drivers, HR personnel who want to make money on the side, somebody who knows a group of engineers that they can place on assignment. It'll grow to be that type of business. There's no employment risk for recruiters and the chance to provide more value to clients as well. It's simple to get started for clients. They add their orders to the Loop, which is the name of our technology. We can do it for them and concierge that if they don't want to be bothered. Then jobs are released to the recruiting network. The recruiting network submits candidates online, and then we manage the whole process through our technology as well. We have strong competitive advantages right now. We're the first to market in this model. The recruiter network has not been done, specifically globally and not to this level. So running as fast as we can like Uber, getting our seed funding. We've been funded by one angel and myself and some of the other founders, and we really waited to go out for our seed round until we were ready. We have an employer ecosystem that handles the work comp and the risk. We have a freemium platform that we give to clients to manage their temp labor so that we can upsell them later on and provide more value on recruiting and so forth. Our recruiters become sales agents. They get excited about making more money. Plus, they know somebody for 10 years at the company down the street, and they tell them about how great our model is as well. We have protectable IP, and as I said, we're first to market. I mentioned on the first slide that our goal is to do $1 billion in payroll between now and 2019. We receive 5 to 12% commission on the pay of all workers in perpetuity throughout their assignment, unless we negotiate something different with the client. So $1 billion generated, 7% on that, all that payroll equals $70 million in net revenue between now and 2019 if we don't do more. Our market adoption, the freemium model is exciting because we can give away our technology to those 100,000 companies that do not have a solution and then bring them along to use our payrolling service and our recruiting. Our sales agents, and I apologize for the way that looks on there, it just didn't turn out right. But the second one is sales agents. Our recruiters become sales agents. We tap into their warm market, commission-only sales force. We work with partners who do the payroll for us and become the employer of record, who also refer us business. And then, of course, there's always traditional marketing. So that's a little bit about PeopleLoop. And thank you for your time. I'd love to field any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bill. Any questions?
I have a question.
Jenny?
So it feels like the market, it could be a marketplace that's a lot more efficient. You have these people needing temp workers. You have temp workers wanting jobs. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to keep the recruiter in the ecosystem.
Oh, okay. This is a great question. So most gig economy companies want to disenfranchise the recruiter, including companies like LinkedIn. They'd rather clients come directly to the website and find a person. Well, Uber taxis don't drive themselves. And the recruiting industry does not work unless you have recruiters in the local market who can find people that are actively looking on a daily basis. And until technology gets good enough to read personalities and pick the right match, which we're a long way off, you're not going to be able to cut recruiters out of the market. The right model is having recruiters to help, not disenfranchising them. When cars can drive themselves, then Uber taxi drivers will be in trouble. That's why we bring the recruiters in. You need them. You have to have them.
So as you said, some recruiters are really good. How do you maintain a recruiter very exclusive to your company? Say if I really like a recruiter and I want to keep him for the longer term.
Sure. Well, number one, they have to make money, right? That's the number one thing. And so we have part-time recruiters who worked with us for 20 hours in a month, and then they get a residual income. I can go into that in a later date. For months and months and months because of the work they did, and mainly we deal with contract labor that goes on and on. You have to make the money. Number two, you have to make sure their resumes don't go into a black hole, meaning they don't get any feedback. They do all this work, and then they don't get any response from it. So, however, many of us are on Facebook, and you see that Uber, again, to use their example, because they are this leader in this space, they're constantly advertising for new drivers. And we have to do the same. Now, when a client gives us a position that we've never had before, a skill set, we need to go out and find new recruiters. A position in Shreveport for light industrial is a very different recruiter than Los Angeles IT. So we're constantly on the move. And yesterday we won a new client who's looking for IT workers in Malaysia. We've never done that. Now, that doesn't scare us because we just need to find recruiters in Malaysia who have the network. So we need to make them money. We need to make sure we're efficient. We have our clients locked down, and we need to keep recruiting them. Yes.
So who pays you? You make 5 to 12%. The recruiter makes money. Who pays you? And what is your cost of goods? As in, your payment processing and all those other things that you got to pay for.
It's a great question. So we're a small startup, 14 months old. Obviously, if you know temporary labor in the audience and on the panel, there's a lot of risk. There's work comp risk, there's tax remittance, there's funding the payroll and make sure you get it from your client within 60, 90, 120 days. So we have a partner model. Originally, when we started out, we brought a $500 million, $800 million employer of record partner in to build a client, because they had the financial wherewithal to work on the work, to have the work comp and all the financial. Our business model, once we're funded, we're in our seed round, is to collect the money, which becomes our gross revenue, by the way. As Uber's gross revenue is the entire fare, and they pay 70% to their taxi drivers. Now, the average markup for staffing companies in the US contract is 40%. Somebody gets paid $10 an hour. The staffing company charges $14 an hour. About 20% to 25% of that is burden. It's what taxes and work comp and all that other stuff, even about 15% margin. So we're highly competitive with that. So when we charge a client, generally our employer partners are less expensive than staffing companies because it's unbundled. And we add on generally to their 20% or so, roughly anywhere between 8 and 15%. So you take their 20% plus 15, you got 35%. So our partner gets paid, then they keep the burden and their margin, and then they pay us anywhere from 7 to 15%, if you will, 8 to 15% or so, depending.
And who pays the recruiter?
We do. We receive the money, then we pay the recruiter.
And what's left of the 40 cents you started with, which is the markup on the employee, on the person?
Yeah.
How does that 40% get divided
Our
up?
margins are 5 to 12% payroll. So it's not cents, it's dollars. So if it's making $100 an hour, it's a fair amount. And it's less expensive than traditional staffing.
Just
Can
to
I
clarify.
ask one quick-
Okay, go ahead.
So you mentioned that you've been in business for 14 months. Can you give us some idea of traction?
Well, you can see the logos in the bottom left.
On like a scale of revenue or?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Well, if we do everything correctly, we'll be at $100,000 a month in net revenue. Now, we've generated over $6 million in payroll, and we've throttled clients. We have a team of 5 full-time people, 16 people that are all told, including the 5, and who are mainly part-time. So it was critical for us, number one, to release our technology in December. We were building the network without technology, and we're a technology-enabled service. We don't bank the farm on technology. So we've been ramping and ramping and ramping. Now the model's in good shape, and we're ready to go out and really do this. So I mentioned the numbers, but we could be doing a lot better for sure.
So last question.
Sure.
We're
How
out
about
of
on
time.
the recruiter side?
Yes.
How many recruiters or what kind of monthly average users do you have on your freemium product?
Sure.
And how does that translate into the number of recruiters that are active with you?
Right, so we don't charge recruiters to use our service, and we have hundreds of recruiters that are signed agreement in our system. The 260,000 number is the potential recruiters in the world that hopefully we can aggregate at some point and do more with them as well. But it's like the law of supply and demand. So if we have a lot of orders for a specific type of recruiter, an IT recruiter, then they'll be active at that point. If those orders go away, remember this is contract labor, that's cyclical. If the orders go away, then they might be on pause until the new order comes in. So, but we've had recruiters work part-time, make $5,000. We've had a month. We've had small staffing companies make $7,000 to $9,000, and generally they're supplementing their income. This isn't their full-time income. And of course, we're just getting started. Does that make sense?
All right. Okay. Really quick.
How much cheaper is this versus traditional?
25%.
Cheaper. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying, just to translate, you're saying that instead of paying $14, the employer pays, pick the number, whatever that is, right? 12 something.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Split. Come on down. The last one.
All right. And our third
All the way from
contestant.
Detroit.
The slide's messed up. All right, sorry.
Yeah?
It's okay. It's
You'll-
good. I jump ahead.
That's okay. You know, the mark of a true entrepreneur is you can handle anything they throw at you, right?
Yep.
Are you ready to go?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Tell us.
So Split is actually an enterprise carpool platform. Usually in this slide, our founder and CEO, Anya, who's not here with us today because she's actually pitching to investors in Austin, as well as talking to the city of Austin because of some situations they had earlier with Lyft and Uber, so it created an opportunity for us. She'll tell a personal story about how she came up with the idea. But I'm also passionate about mobility. If you ask me how I got here today, I actually took a bicycle and then I rode the Caltrain, so I didn't have to sit through all of this. But unfortunately, for most of the people in this room, traffic in the Bay Area is terrible. And Split is creating a carpool platform that's really looking to solve this problem here and also around the U.S., where 128 million commuters every day drive by themselves to work. Everybody talks about on-demand ride sharing. There's Uber, there's Lyft, and they're really making a dent. But the problem is there's still 6.9 billion hours that everyone spends every year driving back and forth from work. And that creates $160 billion of wasted productivity. So if we were to only take 5% of the cars off the road, the speeds would increase by over 50 to 100%. So how does our business model work? We actually charge the employers an annual fee to enroll their employees on this platform. We do not charge a peer-to-peer transaction fee, but we do charge an annual fee up to $150,000 depending on the size of the employer, and this helps create density. The employees sign up through our mobile app that's available on Android and iPhone, and they match with each other. The employees themselves benefit from increased productivity. They're happier once they get to work, and obviously it helps create a culture where there's mentorship, there's sharing of information so that it's not as siloed. The employers themselves also put together an additional marketing pool where they can restripe parking lots, they can give them gas rewards, and even a monthly bonus on their paycheck to help further increase carpool participation. And the reason the employers do so is because they can retain and access more talented employees. They free up a lot of parking spaces, and of course it's great for their corporate social responsibility messaging. In fact, for an example, Magna Corporation, they lost 38% of their employees when they moved their headquarters only 20 miles down the road. So out of a 750-person workforce, 2/5 disappeared because they did not have a platform like Split that allowed people to match together and carpool. So how about, does it work though? Well, we know that early data from our platform shows that an increase of carpooling on average between 3% all the way up to 15%. So that's a 5x increase in participation rates. And in fact, Split, unlike some of the other players in this ride-sharing space, we actually believe in partnerships. We actually play really well with others. In fact, we have a partnership with Lyft now where if you're stranded at work because your partner left or the driver left because of an emergency, we actually give you a guaranteed ride home through Lyft. And in fact, our development team is in the audience today because we have another follow-up meeting with them tomorrow. So anyway, so back to traction, we went through Techstars. We signed up 7 customers, early customers who tested our product and achieved a 35K ARR. We have in the next 45 days closing on 240,000 ARR. And in fact, we're working with an automotive OEM to sign them up in Detroit. Their PR teams got us on embargo, so I can't tell you which one, but it's another 300K in revenue, leading to another 800K in our deal pipeline. And we're really focused on the 20,000 companies that are in the US with 500 employees or more. I know this is a little bit over 5 minutes, but hopefully this will answer your questions. We have a great rollout strategy. We're in the Bay Area in Austin. We've been in the news. We just got an article in Forbes. That's why that icon is a little bit out of place. Article just appeared 9 hours ago. So I had to make changes to the deck this morning while I was on the train. And then we got a great team and great advisors, and we got some great unit economics. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I know the technology's tough, but questions for Split? Any questions? Come on.
Are you getting involved in the compensation between the two people that are carpooling? I pay for the gas or whatever, and the whole insurance question as well?
Yes, so the good news is that we actually spoke to Munich Re, State Farm, and MetLife, and multiple insurance companies have told us that as long as the reimbursement is under 54 cents a mile, which we do have an in-app reimbursement model, then it's okay. The personal insurance, car insurance is fine because it's just reimbursement for wear and tear, and that's totally fine with the IRS as well.
So you set the price per mile between the carpoolers?
Actually, it's set in conjunction with the employer. So depending on geographically where the employer is, the actual per mile is different. So in Detroit, where we started, it was different from Austin, and it's different from the Bay Area.
Thank you.
Other questions?
The amount of money that the companies are paying you, is that to have you run the whole program for their company? And then if so, do they then pay additional money to sort of motivate their employees to participate?
So it's actually a public-private partnership. The annual fee helps us administer the program for their employees. They already have transportation programs in place. Usually they already offer reimbursements for Caltrain or for parking or for something like that. So they already have a pool of money.
Right.
They're just reallocating it towards people who are carpooling now. So it's not an increase in spending there. And in terms of the guaranteed ride home, that's actually usually covered by the local government. They actually have when we register our carpool with the local governments, for example, Pleasanton, they would actually cover the cost of that guaranteed ride. So we just do a pass-through there. So we get to externalize a lot of the costs of running this program.
How do you determine how much to charge corporations for the service?
It's actually depending on what kind of launch they would like to have. So at the very, very minimum, if they just deploy the platform, it's not that much. But if they want to have additional features, such as we're able to track the greenhouse gas savings due to people carpooling, we have real-time tracking of the employees as when they're carpooling, and we also have additional programs and incentives that we're, for example, the payments piece, if they want that. Those are all extras that could then lead up to an annual fee of up to $150,000.
Okay, so where's the entry level on that? Just to follow up on that, what is the entry level fee, and for what sort of size company?
So for a company with only 500 employees and they want just the bare bones system, it's as low as $10,000 a year.
Okay.
And so what does the employee who's driving get out of it?
So the employee actually gets a boost on their paycheck from the employer that pays for a portion of the gas. And then they also are paid by the passenger as well on a per mile basis because our app has a built internal odometer that keeps track of the trips.
So great to see the innovation coming out of Detroit. And so when you think about the total lifetime value of a customer, right, the enterprise, what is that, and what is the sales cycle to sign them up? What has your history been there?
You know, for companies out in the Bay Area, we've really been happy that everybody just wants this product, so the sales cycle is really short, about 45 days. For traditional companies in the Midwest and the South, where we're launching, the sales cycle is a little bit longer, about 60 to 90 days. The contract period is usually 3 years, but we want to have another way where they can re-up for another 2 years after that.
Okay. So last question.
Yeah, and real quick, what's that lifetime value of the customer?
You know, the lifetime value is in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay, one last question. Are we good?
Are you allowing sharing between different companies? No, it's within the same company, right? The carpooling?
Actually, yes. With different companies, you know, which is more of a B2C model, once we have enough density, we would love to turn that on. And then from there, there's actually an additional revenue stream, because then we can charge a transaction fee, because it would be people who wouldn't know each other before anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So wait, just to clarify that. So if you sell a downtown San Francisco company, the company next door can piggyback on it? Is that, or is it the people next door can piggyback on it?
Yeah, so for example, let's say Airbnb, who we are talking to, decides to do piggyback onto Adobe systems, which is across the street, then both of them, if they're our customers, if their employees want to carpool together, then they will see each other in the system.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you increase the pool by doing that. I get it. All right? All right. I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you. Great job.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So this is a pretend partner meeting now.
Okay. Close the door.
Close the doors. Top secret.
We don't want anybody hearing this, right? Okay. All right. We got three companies we just heard, right? So we got iGrow in Indonesia. We got People Loop, and we have Split. Pretty different, guys. What do you think? Anybody want to jump in and say it's obvious? We should back
Split.
Jenny.
Split.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Split.
Okay.
You want to know?
Yeah.
So
convince us.
Okay, convince you on Split? Because for me, it was a big part of it was how I felt about the other two. So I really liked iGrow. I love the social impact of iGrow. I just think there's so much friction to get to meaningful revenue. So if it was a nonprofit, I'd be more of a believer, but for a for-profit, I just think there were too many moving parts for my taste. And then on People Loop, I guess I just had a hard time getting my arms around sort of the new model, but still having the recruiters. He made a good reason as to why they still belong, but that too felt a little bit more challenged for me as a business model, where Split makes sense. I feel that people do want to commute with people that they know, so they could jump in an Uber pool, but it sure would be nice to go with people that you work with. I feel like it could help morale. If I'm a company, I'd be excited that my people are getting together and commuting together. And so just having the technology that enables that makes sense. Of course, I live in a world where I'm scared that Uber will do everything. But I feel that if you really get into the company, it becomes part of company culture, they have an opportunity to make a big difference.
Okay, so Preetha, you're also on Split, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me push back a little bit, or at least devil's advocate a little bit, because I really want to thrash this, which is that, you know, it's not like, so company carpool programs have been around forever and ever and ever. It's not like you really need a lot of technology to solve this problem, right?
But I think the incentive helps.
What?
The incentive helps, right? If I that's the new piece,
That's
right?
not,
it's not
new.
new.
That's been around for a long time. I think for me, the question that if I would diligence Split, right, it would be why this would work this way now when carpool has been around forever and has never really taken off.
On demand too, right? Because sometimes I may be carpooling with someone else, but say I'm not able to go, I could carpool with totally a different person. So the on-demand probably helps.
Okay, so there's more flexibility that, because of the sort of Uber appization of the carpooling, you give more flexibility, and that's a little bit different than being stuck with the same guy. Right, maybe. Okay, any other other preferences? Trevor, I know you're an iGrow enthusiast, and
Yeah.
so
I guess on balance, I thought People Loop deserved more airtime, and you've mentioned some of the benefits of Split, and also some of the challenges I think of iGrow in terms of a bet on a bet on a bet, right? A lot of things have to go right for it to work out. One thing that was very notable here was the domain expertise of the team at the People Loop, right? Was incredibly deep. They'd been successful in this sector before. So when we asked ourselves, in any of our investments that we look at as a partnership here, is this team organic to the problem? People Loop, I would say almost unequivocally yes, right? As I think about successful investments in the past, when people go to a whiteboard and say, let's invent a company that's going to solve a problem, right? At least for me, those tend not to be as successful as the ones where someone is in an industry and sees a screaming problem, right? I'm in the staffing business and I see I'm selling X, but my customers want Y, right? So I'd raise that as a challenge to the split, right? Now, one concern about this, and I can acknowledge the entrepreneur didn't want to share non-public information in this setting, but I did feel as though we didn't get much in terms of the details on the traction. Right. So
in People Loop.
Yeah, People Loop. So that would be a minus that I couldn't really assess it, and perhaps he was sensitive to articulating those in a public setting.
Well, he said he's run $6 million worth of payroll through the system, and that sounds like a big number, right? But and some
100K per month.
Right. So so interesting question,
that's
but
where he hopes to be
At the end of the year.
So I mean, in our partner meeting, we do discuss.
Yes.
these
What
things.
did you hear?
I heard that he wasn't that there must not be a lot of traction right now because in revenue, because he talked about where he is instead of where he will be instead of where he is. And so when a company's been at it for 14 months and it makes sense, there are people using it. I wonder, are people valuing it, right? People will use anything in recruiting that can potentially help them. It's when they start to pay and when you start to see scale that you know if you actually have something working. And I'm not saying it's not there. I just wasn't able to get it out of his few minutes up here.
I would say companies that I think do well incrementally within a market, generally those founders have domain expertise. Like to Trevor's point, they have seen a problem perhaps because they were working on another problem and they saw something adjacent to it. But I think actually the exponential companies are generally founders who have no domain expertise whatsoever. And the reason
be
being,
careful, Trevor's the data guy here,
I understand
right?
The reason being is because I think people who have been too close to a problem always identify the reasons why it won't work, versus people who are completely naive to it. And yeah, I mean, we can think of like Elon Musk at Tesla and why a luxury electric car wouldn't work, or we can think about the Google folks, and these were exponential, game-changing companies, and I think incremental companies make money too.
So, I mean, I would just to pile on with Carey on this is this thing that he comes. The People Loop guy says this is disruptive, and then you find out. He's connecting all these mom and pop recruiters all over the world. It's as if you wrote a technology that would connect travel agents, to airline, right? I mean, it feels like he's not really being disruptive.
Well, let me defend the entrepreneur with domain expertise, right? So there are many counter examples of that. So in our portfolio, Philip Krim from Casper, right, had started a mattress business in his dorm room, matched up with one of the design leads from IDEO, who had been doing design for Sealy, and the company's doing incredibly well. So I think there are many counter examples. On balance, as a fund, I would say we should pick the person with domain expertise over the person and team without it.
So, but they all have some legitimate domain expertise, right? I mean, so certainly iGrow knows a lot more about farming in Indonesia than any of us do, right?
Yeah.
So, and clearly Split has, plugged in to, that domain at some level. So, at the margin, People Loop has more years of specific recruiting domain expertise. but it's not clear they have the same sort of expertise that's required to create an online marketplace, maybe, arguably. I don't know. So anybody enthusiast for iGrow? Anybody want to push for iGrow? So Jacques, where are you?
So I love iGrow. I think the intention is absolutely good. I think the notion that you invest in farmers so that you let them cultivate their land and you have the whole closed loop with the price and all that, I think that's wonderful. By the way, that's what people did in the Middle Ages, but without technology. And so that model is likely to work, and I would absolutely encourage them to continue. If they want to have a social impact, they have to be successful as a business. And so I would ditch completely, as you can tell from my question, the whole landing club piece of it. If you have a model that returns 20%, trust me, you'll not have any problem to make money. So do it, but do it that way. Without that, and with the naivety a little bit of the entrepreneur, it would be very hard. And besides, we don't invest outside the US. People Loop, I was extremely negative. We had a company spot in that space. I can't remember the name. It was 4 or 5 years ago. It was, why does Manpower and everybody else have...
You're blocking this. It was so traumatic. You're blocking this out.
Why does Manpower need to have brick and mortar? All this can go on the web. And that company, which was with a tremendous entrepreneur, went straight into the whole, never succeeded. I think this is a business that has no margin. And when you try to build a business, the overall thing has no margin. And when you try to build a business that gets margin from people that already make no margin overall, chances are, it's not going to be profitable. And I think the entrepreneur hesitancy to give the quantified results of where he's at after 14 months made me very uncomfortable. So I'd go with split, but I would ask a lot of questions as to why now, why this. But that is absolutely the kind of thing where you talk to a customer or 2 or 3 and they explain to you why this is going to work, despite the fact that all their carpool things haven't worked before, and that would probably get my vote without a heartbeat.
Okay, so Carey, where are you?
For me, I'm a big fan of Split. My mother-in-law carpools. She works for UCLA down in Los Angeles.
Carey, I appreciate that, but we're at a VC fund partner meeting, and mother-in-law. Okay,
but
give me some hard data here.
When I asked her, I was like, carpooling. Oh wow, carpooling. Who does that? She told me the sign-up process, how long it takes to wait, and I was like, and then you have to get on this list. There's an administrator, and then you get matched up, and that takes 3 months. And after 6 months, she finally got matched with someone. I was like, are you joking me? This is why no one carpools. So I think if you can bring technology to facilitate this process, where I really like the idea of even going to your competitor or even a company right across the street. That's awesome. It's aggregation at a high level, and it brings ease to this very manual and outdated process.
I actually disagree with that last piece. I would strongly advise the entrepreneur to focus on the model as it is, because as soon as you cross-pollinate between companies, you have privacy issues, you have regulation issues, you have all kinds of issues. I think the defaulting into Lyft, that is wonderful, because the number one concern that people have when they carpool is the other person is going to let them down. And so having a fallback like that, I love that. And I'm sure for Lyft and Uber, it's a great lead gen for customers.
So I'm going to make one last pitch here for iGrow, which is to say, we're anxious about Split because it should be a natural play, but it hasn't really worked that well historically, but it seems more down the middle than People Loop or iGrow. And so there's a strong orientation here. I'm not sure, Trevor, I think you're People Loop. That's where you are, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm coming out of balance. On iGrow, one of the major issues is currency risk. And I did invest early in my career in a company in Brazil that was doing very, very well.
Right.
They devalued the real, and my option was all that was worth anything. Right, the business was worth zero. I sold the derivative to get a slight return on the investment.
So have you ever invested in Kiva companies? Have you ever done Kiva?
No.
You haven't. Okay. So Kiva has theoretically they have currency risk, but they've done tremendously well, aggregating billions of dollars. Even though they do have currency risk, right? So I'm just making a pitch to you guys. I'm not sure that I'm not loving People Loop because I mean, I love the guys, yes. I love them all. I love them all. But I'm a little concerned it's not disruptive enough. Split also is not disruptive enough. It makes sense, but heck, shouldn't you be able to get a decent carpool system in your company? How hard can that be, right? But iGrow, I mean, they want to change the world. They want to make the world an organic farm. And so... Who left the door open? So, I don't know. I mean, I'm just...
Back to what's our firm's mission? Is it to make
Right.
the world a better place, or are LPs looking for a return on the investment? And
My concern is that Split, so Split and people who are going to take a lot of our capital. iGrow, we can dribble a little bit in, see if it works.
Why does Split have to take a lot of our capital? I mean, I guess I come out saying, is disruption always the best thing? If you can take human behavior, things that people always have wanted to do, and for the first time you can make it really simple to do it, and companies shouldn't each be creating their own technology platform to enable carpooling. That should be done by somebody else. And so I think you take something today, that demand that already exists, you apply the technology, the companies want to do it, and in terms of why now, people are more upset about the traffic and care more about greenhouse effects than they ever have. So I feel the time is now, and if it's a click of the button on mobile and I have a backup plan, and you know that people want to carpool, including his mother, like it's all good.
In-law.
And so I love what iGrow is doing, but I think the path from here to significant revenue is a very long, hard path.
Okay, my colleagues, I'm sensing that the partnership here is gravitating toward a split. Are you guys good with? That's where we are. Do you want to fight, bleed, and die for People Loop, or are you?
I'd say the People Loop market is larger, right? Because these companies are already using temporary staffing. So they can layer themselves into the market, notwithstanding the reservations that Jacques has suggested, which are valid. It's a very big market, arguably bigger than the carpool market, right? And again, what you need with the carpool market is a concentrated set of employees. As the world goes to a more dispersed employee base, right, they're not all going to be going to one central location. And I think with the growth of technologies like GoToMeeting and others, we've seen people able to work remotely much more effectively. As that world continues to evolve, perhaps their market gets eroded somewhat.
I agree with Trevor that People Loop's a bigger market, right? And it should scale more rapidly.
You're taking the gross market.
Yeah.
Think about the sliver of the total market that they have a right to take a cut on, and then they have huge cogs in running their operation. So in terms of the gross profit of the operation, even though you're starting from a very large number, you're dividing it and dividing it and dividing it, and then taking a huge operating cost. So
I don't think they have an operating cost.
They do.
No, because they're pushing all that onto the recruiters.
No. They at the end of the day want to run payroll and stuff like that themselves. That's what I heard.
Yeah, no, they were running the payroll. The other thing that I think I didn't get from the presentation is, no matter how big the market is, and I do agree that how big is the market, you have to really question how much value are you adding? Is this a 10x better solution than what's out there today? And I just didn't get that pitch. It may be, but I wasn't wowed, like, holy cow, if the world looks like this after, I'm in. So I think a combination of for those reasons.
So no one is persuaded by Trevor's impassioned plea for People Loop. Is that what I'm hearing? Carey, you're not swayed?
Nope.
You're still on Split?
Yeah.
Okay, we're still on Split. Trevor, can you live with Split?
Yes, and I think the important thing about a partnership is we make a decision, we lock arms and move forward, right? And that's what allows a partnership to thrive over the long haul. So
Kumbaya.
Yeah. And I'd say, had the entrepreneur been more able to share details about the traction, maybe then I would have fought harder. But given the fact that we didn't truly get the traction details,
we'll get that in the due diligence, okay? Right? After we issue.
You can do more work on it and bring it back next week.
Yes. Okay. All right. I think we're being. Somebody's knocking on the door.
Can I say something?
Nima. Hi.
Is it split?
It's
split.
Yes.
So it's a personal story. I've been going back and forth to Detroit for a while now, and I've met these guys when they were still at Techstars, and they've made a ton of progress. And I don't know who it was, but ultimately the UI UX is great. They're doing a really good job, and I was there before they even had those first customers, so they're kicking ass. So with much delight, I want to introduce the winners. Split, Howard, Nathan, this is the amazing trophy that you have to put on your... All right. So,
we got the Split team here. Come on up.
Nathan, you want to come down too? So you guys won $120,000 in cloud services from IBM. And an awesome check. Also, Nathan and Founder Suite are going to give you a lifetime membership for Founder Suite to manage all your shit that you have to get done. And ultimately, you guys are awesome. Congratulations. Thank you, everybody.
Big round of applause for Split.
Thank you for the partners.
And a round of applause for the VC. Do we have time to do anything else, or are we done?
No, we want to say thank you to everybody, partners, sponsors, IBM, Salesforce, all the organizations that helped us. This was a ton of work, but hopefully you guys had fun. You learned something. You met some cool people. We have an after party next door, drinks, and we'll have a good time. And hopefully we'll see you next year.
All right.